Welcome back, everyone, to Lesser Known Operators. This week we had our first second generation Green Beret, Dr. Jay McGinnis. Joined Special Forces in the 80s, went to PA school in the 90s, got out for a little bit, then 9/11 happened and got to do some of that secret squirrel stuff over in a special missions unit on the other side of the fence. After that, he got his doctoral degree in human and organizational learning with his dissertation on resilience. The main thing I want to get you guys to check out, though, is the Valhalla Sailing Project, a veterans outreach organization that takes veterans out on the ocean, teaches them some sailing, and brings together a sense of community. I hope you guys enjoy this episode as much as I did. Remember to like, share, subscribe, and comment. And first one to comment will get a shout out next week. We'll see if that can draw up some more comments in the comment section. I appreciate all of you guys. Thank you for listening and enjoy the show. Jay McGinnis, welcome to Lesser Known Operators. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Yeah, right. I love so much about this. You asked, how do you like this? This is the great part, is I get to meet people of all different generations and learn more about the shit that I didn't take the time to learn when I was in. Because when you're in, you're focused on right now and then maybe a couple hours from now, but I really didn't focus on this stuff. So it's nice to just sit and have this long form conversation, and we'll see where it goes.
Sounds good. That's what I'm here for.
So you're coming in on, so you retired as an officer, enlisted guy in the beginning, right?
Yep.
But really, I want to talk about first, father was a Vietnam era SF guy.
Yeah. I think I went to the family business. My dad's stories, the parallels are a little frightening at times. My dad actually enlisted in the Air Force right out of, I won't say right out of high school, but shortly after high school. Berlin Wall had gone up. He was an Air Force medic. He and mom got married, and he was out at, I want to say, Nellis Air Force Base, worked on the flight line with the old, the initial U-2 program, and then got sent to Germany. And at the time, because of the wall, they were not allowing dependents to go over. So that, I think, for about 6 months. And then mom was able to go over. Long story short, he did his tour in the Air Force, got out, was selling insurance, and came home from work one day and just told mom, he said, I don't want to do this anymore. And this would have been, 64, 65 time frame. He had joined a National Guard unit in North Carolina and gone through the Q course and gotten SF qualified there. And, at the time, Vietnam, they were going through lieutenants pretty quickly. So it was not a big leap for him to go on active duty. But this was back in the, like I said, the 60s, where it was not its own branch. So he was an infantry officer who happened to be SF qualified. So he went on active duty, did his first tour with 5th Group, and then came home, and they essentially told him, you're going to go take a company command, and then as soon as your company command's done, you're going back to Vietnam. So he did a tour of 5th Group, came back, had company command of a basic training company at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. Clearly, it was a while back. And then went over as a company commander with a company out of the 199th Light Infantry Brigade.
Back then, as you said, that things were a little different. It was more of a on-the-job training sort of thing, really, back then, wasn't it?
Yeah, I don't know about the progression into SF in that era. I don't know if the Q course itself was in existence. I really don't know. I have read that there were some guys that if you had the correct qualifications or whatever, and you got assigned to a team, that there was this sort of OJT type thing, and then you got the ominous dominus and whatever, and were considered special forces qualified. but I seem to feel like my dad went through some version of an officer qualification course, because I know my dad passed away several years ago, but I know through looking at some of his records, he was had an additional identifier as a psychological operations guy. And that's actually what he did with Fifth Group. He was really worked more on the PSYOP side of things than he did with the detachment. Went back over, as I said, with a conventional unit, and then taught at Bragg for a bit. I remember that as a child. He was the old, what was it called? The USA JFK MIA, United States Army John F. Kennedy IMIA, or some Institute for Military Assistance, or something weird like that. I mean, it had a 15 word title to it, but he taught there. And then we wound up at 10th Group at Devon's. We were there for about 4 years. That would have been 73 to about 77. Okay. And then we came back to Bragg, and he commanded Camp McCall for a year and some change, and then retired shortly thereafter.
Okay, so yeah, he out back in. I mean, Camp McCall was really, everything happened out there at that time. Really,
yeah,
right?
No, yeah, I mean,
it wasn't like it is today, where you've got this massive campus.
Well, I will tell you. So I would, again, this is maybe some of the privilege of being an SF brat. I'd go out there with him every once in a while, out to Camp McCall. And when I went through phase one, the first attempt in 87, not much had changed, man. The tar paper shacks were still there. What we used to refer to as the John Wayne Memorial Shower, it had just been built. We weren't allowed to use it. There was no chow hall. It was a GP mediums. And things were trucked out in a mermite. So not much had changed from when my dad commanded in the late 70s, early 80s, until I went through, 6 years later.
Isn't that crazy to see that? You see that as one side of it, and then you have the privilege to come back and see it as a student. And then, because when you were a kid, you didn't realize how much it sucked to be a student, and then you come back and go, oh man.
No, as a kid, and I think probably more so when Dad was at Devon's. Devon's was really neat because it was unlike Bragg, very small post. And there was the Army Security Agency, ASA, which I believe, don't quote me on this, but I think ASA was the predecessor to the NSA. I could be wrong. It's just, it's a military history from way back. But so the ASA was up there, and 10th Group was there, and that was pretty much it. So it was really a pretty neat installation to be on, and it was small, real tight insular community. And I can't tell you this single name of one of the guys in my dad's company or on my dad's team, but I just looked up to those guys. To me, they were they were larger than life dudes. They were all Vietnam era guys. Some of them had done the Det A thing over in Berlin. They they were heroes to me. And so I think that
just
probably
tough
led
men,
to the progression for me going, right?
Yeah. Did that play with your psyche and your decision-making process at all, having witnessed that with your dad, and then you decided to go into the military? Was that in the back of your mind all the time, that Dad did all these great things and I better get my shit together?
Well, I don't want to leap too far too fast, but
no, you're good.
I graduated high school from Pine Forest Senior High School in 1980, and left to go to North Carolina State University. When I left Pine Forest High School, I swore never join the Army, never coming back to Fort Bragg as long as I live. I'm done with this. And I was about as ready to go to NC State as I was ready to go to the flipping moon, man. I was not prepared for college in the least. At the end of my first year, my first semester, I had a 1.1 GPA. At the end of my second semester, my cumulative GPA was a 0.5. I mean, I was just a stellar underperformer in college. And I, several years later, after bouncing around from job to job and maybe picking up a part-time college course here or whatever, I tell people this all the time. I woke up one morning. I'd moved to Richmond, chasing a girl, and I literally woke up one morning and looked at the ceiling in my apartment, and I swear to you, I'm not exaggerating. It wasn't an idea. A voice in my head said, your peer group is passing you by. You need focus and you need discipline. You need to join the Army. And and so once that switch flipped, then the whole growing up SF, I went to the recruiter, and the recruiter, called up down to it's a long story, but we got time. We got 2 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah. I picked up the phone book in Richmond. I'm flipping through it looking for a recruiter, and stumbled across an address, or not an address, but a phone number for 11th Special Forces Group. And I had no idea the Special Forces existed on the Guard or Reserve side. Because my sum total experience with it was, my dad in active duty. And so I go down to the recruiter, and I'm like, hey, I want to go do what these guys are doing. And he told me, he said, I can't get you over there. They're not showing any openings. And he said, I can get you into a straight leg infantry unit. And growing up as a son of a paratrooper, I knew that if I walked in the front door of my house and told my dad I was a straight leg 11 Bravo, that was a non-starter. In my dad's world, if you weren't airborne, you were not. So.
Yeah. For those listening at home, a leg is someone who is not airborne qualified, and they are lesser than human compared, in the minds of the airborne, lesser than human compared to airborne soldiers. Is that pretty much correct?
I mean, it is certainly the service rivalry there. I will tell you, I had a wonderful, wonderful experience with the 4th Squadron, 7th U.S. Cavalry in Korea. They were fantastic human beings. I love the Cavs. But yeah, in the culture of the airborne, if you're not airborne, you kind of are you haven't quite fully matured as a soldier if you're not airborne qualified, according to the airborne culture, for sure.
Yeah, it is an indoctrination, though, too, in the airborne, because if you're in an airborne unit, your whole life revolves around jumping and talking about jumping, and then just sitting out there miserable rigged up in a chute that's uncomfortable, waiting to jump, and then the jump gets canceled, and you go, "Oh, this is awesome! I love this! Oh, this is so great!"
Yeah.
So do you think, looking back, that the Army was the structure that you needed to kickstart? Because obviously you didn't get your doctorate with a 0.5 GPA.
No.
So it had to be that structure that the Army gave you to turn things around and to be not staring up at the ceiling, having hallucinations.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's funny that you should ask that question, because I think at least for me, as I've gotten older and I've looked back on my career in the military, and I think all of us go through this to a certain degree. There are things I wish I had done, things I wish I had done differently. I look back at my time as a baby fresh out of the Q course on a team, and just the lack of awareness of I guess the military side of what we were doing. To me, I just was hanging out with my buds and we were doing cool stuff, right? I didn't have a real, because I didn't come through the conventional military. I wasn't really ingrained. That wasn't really ingrained in me as a soldier. But I will say that I think that going through the 18 Delta program was the event for me. That is when it dawned on me that I probably was bringing more to the game than I was giving myself credit for. Bear in mind, I went through under the old structure of phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. And phase 1 was just a slugfest. You just went out there and you just put your head down and you found your land navigation points, you did your patrolling, you got screamed at, you got yelled at, you did your floater kicks, you did your push-ups, you ate occasionally, and it was a suckfest, but you just dealt with it. To me, that was the easy part. When I showed up at Fort Sam Houston, and we started getting into the nuts and bolts and the nitty gritty of the medical stuff, man, that's when the brain kicked into overdrive. But I think coming through that was probably the first aha moment for me that I'm bringing a little bit more to the game than I've been giving myself credit for.
Yeah, I think all guys, when you're going through the course, all the guys, you realize because they push you as far as they can to get as much out of you. Otherwise, you're not going to pass that next phase. Like you said, when they're smoking the shit out of you, right? Finally, at one point, you just realize, well, I'm not going to quit, and they can't kill me. So I just have to do this, and then we'll be done eventually. And it's the same with different phases of the course. Well, I'm going to do the best I can, or I'm, going to fail out, and failing out's not an option. Well, I guess I got to learn all this stuff and push it to the next level.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of my attitude when I went out there. It was, one or two things are going to happen. I'm either going to go to phase 2 or I'm not. And I'm not going to quit. You can kick me out. You can tell me no. Because this is pre-selection or any of that assessment type phase stuff. It was almost like phase 1 and assessment were all rolled into one, and it was just like I'm not leaving voluntarily. You're going to have to kick me out, or that was, to me, that was the only option.
So what's that process like? So you're in 11th Special Forces Group as a junior enlisted guy, and then you go to the pack clerk and say, hey, do you have to get it okayed, or what's that look like? How does all that work? Because you said there's no selection.
Yeah. This was the journey for me. Cause I went to see the recruiter. He said, I can put you in, I think it was like the 69th Infantry, something or another up here. It was at Fort AP Hill, Virginia, or whatever they're calling it now. I told him, I said, straight leg's not an option. And so he said, well, here's the address for the unit. Drive up there. They may have something they're not telling us about. So I drove up, and by accident, it happened to be a drill weekend. And so I went to see the sergeant major. And of course, because I'd grown up in the culture, I knew enough to call people by their rank. And, so I got a minute to talk to him, and, he said, I need medics, and I need radio operators. And I said, well, Sergeant Major, I was really thinking about that weapons sergeant thing. And he said, okay, I'll try this again. I need medics and I need radio operators. And I was like, I always want to be a medic, Sergeant Major. And so that then they essentially gave me a paragraph and line number. I took that back to the recruiter. And then I got set up. And it's not unlike the X-ray program. It just was it was called Rep 63, and it was a pathway that Guard and Reserve units could pull a kid that they thought had some potential off the street, basic, AIT, jump school, Q course, and then graduate the Q course and straight back to your reserve unit as and I use this term very loosely, a qualified, Green Beret.
Yeah, well, as qualified as we are when we go through the modern course, or back then, you don't know shit about
That's exactly why I use
anything.
exactly.
You
You know,
think you do, but unless you were coming from the regular army and you're a senior dude, you don't know anything. And then you get to a team and nobody likes you. So,
pretty much. Yep.
um, I think, and I'd have to verify this with one of my buddy. He's a ops sergeant and National Guard, and I think they do a similar thing. And I don't know if it's just for soldiers in National Guard units. They do a little assessment, and then they can pull them and send them on their way. And it's a little different because I know the Guard guys going through the course had a little different pathway. They kind of, they knew what they were going to do afterwards, where we had no clue what was going to happen after we graduated.
Yeah, so between actually signing the paperwork and getting the orders to go to basic, my job, every month was to be at AP Hill drilling with the unit, although I was not officially in the Army yet. I hadn't even been a basic. But that was a little bit of an intro to, I guess, give them a chance to look at me and sort me out a little bit. But it was nothing like, I think, and again, I'm so far removed from what's going on now, but I see these things on social media where it looks like that the Guard units in particular have got sort of a prep course or sort of I don't even know what it's called, but it looks like they're being a little more deliberate about assessing and preparing before they ever even send someone off to go through the program.
I think that's a budgetary thing because they want their return on investment, where in the Army, regular Army, they don't give a shit because if you fail out, you're just going to the 82nd and you're already airborne qualified. So you're good there. But if you fail out in the Guard side, they have to pay for that and they get nothing for it in the end. So I think that's a big factor in how they things. So you go through basic, or one infantry, one side unit training and all that.
No, it was again because I was because I enlisted specifically.
How did you get into the military?
Yeah, it's weird, right? It's a backwards way of doing it, which is, and there are more stories about how I circumvented the system to do what I wanted to do, which is probably why I would not have done well in big Army and did, I guess, moderately okay in SF. I went to basic training at Fort Knox, and because of the way the orders were laid out, and it was just with school availability, I went to Fort Benning before I went to AIT. So I enlisted as an 18 Delta. But in order to become an 18 Delta back then, you had to have a medical MOS before you could have an 18 series MOS. So I went basic, airborne school, and then I went to the 90, back then it was called 91 Alpha, it's now 68 Whiskey, program in San Antonio, Texas, as a airborne qualified private E1. And then graduated that and went to brag into phase one. I mean, it was a rocket ship trajectory. I don't recommend it, and I don't even advocate for it. And I say that having done time on active duty on an active duty team and a reserve team, I don't recommend.
Sounds like a lot of opportunities to get in trouble.
Yeah.
Unsupervised. Hey, go here and just figure it out, private. So good on you for not torpedoing your career right there.
Yeah, no, a lot of opportunity to get in trouble, and a lot of opportunity to think you're more than you really are. You get caught up in in all of that, and you start to believe it.
Yeah, that's a thing too, right? You think you're more than you are, and you start to show it off, and then you realize you're not, and that's a good way to lose rank and lose credibility real quick. Did you see? Did that happen to guys? Because there had to be other guys you kept seeing along this path. Were guys getting in trouble and just falling by the wayside at this point, or?
So I think this is a credit to the leadership at the various Guard and Reserve units. didn't see too many duds coming through that Rep 63 program. They tended to weed themselves out pretty quickly. I mean, all the guys that I went through with that I can think of off the top of my head are doing extremely well. They're, of course, now that I've said that they're doing well, I can't come up with a single name, which is part of the getting old part. Dan Talbot went through that program with me. He was out of a unit out of Connecticut, but we went through a portion of the Q course together, and he wound up deployed a number of times, got commissioned as well, I believe. Was on the SWAT team, if I believe correctly, out at, matter of fact, I was watching, remember that old show Cops? You ever watch Cops?
No, I never heard of it. What's that one about? No, yes.
Oh, what you gonna do, bad boy, right? I'm sitting at home watching this thing, and there's like this Dan Talbot. I'm like, damn, I know a guy named Dan Talbot. And I looked on TV, and boom, it's Dan. So he did well. Brian Duffy, another guy that I went through with. Brian, I ran into Brian when I was at Bragg as a medical officer, and his unit was deploying in the early days of the 9/11 response, and he had gone to PA school, and he was a trauma neurosurgical PA, but he never took his commission. He kept his enlisted rank, so he deployed as a detachment medic, as a staff sergeant, but he was working as a trauma surgery PA, and I was like, this team could not be in any better hands, right? So we didn't have too many. The duds, they sorted themselves out. They didn't last long. They either didn't make it through basic, or they quit in jump school, or they didn't seem to stick around.
So you make it to the course, and in the note that you sent me, sir, it says you failed land nav. What the fuck?
Yeah, I'm not going to make excuses. Yeah.
And so not a lot changes on Bragg, right? That STAR course, or that land nav course you did, was very similar to what I did. And that's a really humbling exercise that they do out there, right? You get a map, you get a protractor and a compass, and they launch you in the dark at midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
And all you get is 10 numbers, right? Do we get 10 or 8? Whatever, doesn't matter.
8-digit grid, yeah.
8-digit grid. Yeah. And you have to figure out in the dark and walk through the dark from here to there, and you don't get any other information other than that. No. And it's a really humbling experience, and you either plot it correctly and make the correct decision, or you wander around in the dark all night trying to figure out what the fuck you did wrong until the sun comes up. So I totally get that there.
Well, yeah. Well, so I don't know how it was when you went through, and I'm loath to get into my course is harder than your course. I'm not even going to go down that pathway.
I was in the first easy course, actually. I was in the first easy course. We didn't. Yeah, I was all online, and I just mailed in my certificate.
Yeah. Well, you got fed 3 times a day, but they had, prior to our class going out, the graded land nav was, they had these white engineer stakes in the ground, and you had a little, typical land nav thing, and that's what you had to find. And I'm not saying that was easy, right? But that's what you had to find. And then at the time, Colonel Potter, Dick Potter, was in charge of the Q course in some capacity or another, and he really wanted to model phase 1 as like a mini SAS, mini CAG type selection or land navigation. So he implemented this STAR course, and what we had to find was an instructor sitting next to a tree in the middle of the woods, and it's probably still that way.
That's the way it is. Yeah, but it's students that have passed, or they're in a different phase. But the cadre are out there trying to find you doing something wrong, and the students, they don't give a shit. You just come up, they stamp your thing, they give you your next coordinates, and you're off on your way.
So we had the instructors running the trails as well, looking for us because you can't walk on the roads, can't use the bridges. But anyway, as you alluded to earlier, you get a map, you get a compass, you get a protractor. And the other thing that a lot of people don't think about is that region of North Carolina, terrain features are virtually non-existent. I mean, there's creeks, but you can look on your map. The map will suggest that you're walking over a hilltop, but, it's got a 20-meter, contour lines, and they're this far apart. You could walk over a hill in the middle of the night and not even know it. And I had never done it again. So this goes back to, I didn't grow up in big Army. That was my first exposure to land navigation, period, ever, other than some piddly stuff I'd done in the Boy Scouts as a kid. So it's like, hey, welcome to the Army. Here's a map, here's a protractor, here's a compass, and Starland Nav. Show me what you can do, private. And
different like at least, because you had to do 4 days, I think, in selection. It was two in the day, and then you went out that following night, 2 nights in a row, and you didn't know how many points you had to find to pass. Yeah. I found all of them, but you had classes the days before you went out, and they taught you everything, and it was basic that you needed to know to be successful out there. But in your day, they just handed you the thing and said, figure it out. Right?
Well, no, I'll give them credit. I will tell you the level of instruction was better than anything I'd ever had before. They told you everything you needed to know, taught you everything you needed to know on how to navigate, but learning it in the classroom versus going out in the woods and actually doing it, those are 2 completely different things. And this was the initial. We were the first class to have to do it in that era, at least, because I've talked to some older guys and they'll claim they were the first class to do it. But when we went out, we were told we were the first class where it was going to occur for grade. Again, the mid '80s, and we started at, like you said, like 10:30, 11 o'clock, and I had to wait for it to get dark, and it was in the summer, so we had to wait for it to get dark. You did not know how many points you had. You just go to this point, you get to that point, they're going to give you your next point. Get to that point, they'll give you your next. So if you didn't find the next point, you were done. It wasn't like, a standard big Army type of land nav where you get all your points at once and you can plot them and then you can decide the most efficient route to go. And you're right. You just wandered until you either found something or the sun came up and you ran out of time.
Yeah, that one was the equalizer in the course. Yeah, I'd probably never do it again. But if I had to, I'd probably complain about it the whole time, like I did when I had to do it. But was that like, did that bring you back down to earth when you when you failed that and you had to go back? What was that mood like going back to your unit and you failed phase 1?
Oh, miserable. God, you felt like such a loser. And I'll give you more history there. Because when I sent you the sort of the little brief on it, so I went out, I failed it, and then we went back to Fort Bragg proper, and I got an automatic recycle. So I spent like the next 30 days basically on perpetual detail. I picked up more pine cones than I knew any one pine tree could possibly produce for probably a month. I wasn't pushing a lawnmower, picking up pine cones. It was just, you were free labor. And there was no additional learning that took place. It wasn't like, okay, you struggled, let's put you in a program, let's get you up to speed. It was just wait till the next class to start. So I went back out and failed it again. And so that's what sent me, high achiever. So that is what sent me back to my reserve unit. And guys on Facebook, Craig Rutherford was the training NCO there, old 10th group guy, and because there were a lot of guys were coming back because of the way they had done the STAR. A lot of Guard and Reserve units were getting guys failing out. And So he basically set up a land nav training program. And for the next, I had to wait 6 months before I could go back. And for the next 6 months, every drill, and I was fortunate, right? It was at Fort AP Hill. Showed up, formation, here's your map, here's your compass, there's your land nav course. And I did land nav every drill for 6 months. And then went back to the Q course in January, and I don't want to say sailed through, but clearly, it was, I got through it.
You're just more confident at it. You practice. That's one thing that if you're not comfortable in the dark, alone, walking around in the woods, you'll freak out, or any number of things will get in your way. You'll get in your own way. You'll see a draw on a map and you'll think it's bigger than it is, and you'll try and plot around it, and then you'll get lost. And
or worse yet, you'll see a draw and think there's nothing to it, and next thing you know, you're in the middle of it and you're stuck. Yeah, so I think it was a combination of good mentoring, good training from professional NCOs, and then the confidence that comes along with succeeding. So when I went back, I was more sure of my own capability, and I think that's definitely played into it.
Is this your first introduction to resilience that would play out later in your medical career?
I think so. Yeah, I think in my doctoral work, like we talked about, centered a lot on resilience. Now, my doctoral work was on resilience in people who work in emergency medicine. But as I dig into that concept or that construct of what it means to be resilient, yeah, I think so, without a doubt. I mean, I look back, back to what we talked about earlier. There was a point in that second time out there, doing land nav, I just dude, I got no clue where I am. I don't know where I'm supposed to be going, but I wasn't going to quit. I just kept walking, hoping I would bump into something. And
there's got to be a stake out here somewhere.
Yeah, no, it's like if I just stumble on some dude sitting next to a tree who's an instructor, maybe by some chance it'll be the right one. But then going back and going to the unit, reserve unit, and just again, I can't say enough. It was just, I had really good NCOs who put on a recognized that there was a deficit in a group of people that was consistent, right? We were seeing it wasn't just one dude who couldn't do it. There clearly were multiple people who were facing that same type of an obstacle. So good, solid training from dedicated and focused NCOs, build up the confidence, and then the competence to go back and give it another shot.
You served in 80s, 90s, and the 2000s, right?
Uh-huh.
What do you think happened? Do you think the NCO Corps evolved for better or for worse over those years?
Oh, wow. Now that is a superb question. I think the NCO Corps has certainly evolved. I don't want to be the curmudgeon that says one is better than the other. I think it has evolved, and I think it's evolved as it is needed to address the generation that it's responsible for. That's a political. Some might accuse me of making a political dodging the answer response, but I going through the Q course, or actually in San Antonio, Texas, as a private 91 Alpha in an AIT program. As I said earlier, if you were going to be a medic, you had to have a medical MOS before you could go be an 18 Delta. So I had one NCO in particular, Dave Meikle, was Buck Sergeant out of 2nd Ranger Battalion, and he wanted to go going to the Q course, but he had been in 11 Bravo, and he was going to be in 18 Delta, so he had to go to AIT as a buck sergeant out of Ranger Battalion to get a medical MOS before he could go into the pipeline to be an 18 Delta. And he recognized what my path was, and he pulled me under his wing and taught me how to my first introduction, what it is to be an NCO, to be a leader. He made me by default the little platoon leader, so I got to do all the drill and ceremony stuff. Sort of had me prepped for PLDC right off the bat. Just a phenomenal. Actually, he was a first group guy too. He went to warrant officer school and went out first group. And then I look at going through the Q course. A guy named Valentino Perez was also a seventh group guy. Did a lot of stuff down in Peru and El Salvador. A Cuban by ancestry, fluent in Spanish. Going through the Q course, the phase 2 of the program, Bali pulled me up under his wing and tried to turn me into a soldier. So I think the NCO Corps in my era was going through a transition without a doubt, and I was fortunate to have some really good. Tom Devlin was another one. He was actually with my reserve unit. Tom had been on active duty as the NCO. Just really helped shape and mold me. And that's before I ever wound up in 7th group. This is when I was just going through the Q course. Looking at it now, again, I'm retired in 2013, and I spent the last handful of years not really in position to see NCOs doing what NCOs do with the young soldiers. But I know my time in the 82nd, I was impressed as a medical officer. I was generally impressed with the NCOs there. I'm probably not answering your question, but I still think the NCO Corps is as strong as it ever was. But I do think it probably does business a little differently.
So there's going to be good leaders and bad leaders regardless of when they're in, and the good ones will rise to the top and the bad ones will fall away.
Or sometimes the bad ones
rise. And I get what you said. Yeah. I get what you said there. You will either rise or fall to the level of your audience, right?
Yeah.
If you have this generation of soldiers, you have to be this generation of NCO. Yeah. But I think it's just interesting that, cultural things and how it evolved, because you came in as a post-Vietnam guy and a certain way, and then that evolved into more of the Desert Storm era, and then we get into the global war on terror when that's completely different way of doing things. So it's just interesting to hear your perspective on that. But speaking of post-Vietnam era, you went through the Q course when there was some Special Forces legends in command of the things. Nick Rowe was your training group commander when you got to go through. Did you ever interact with that man?
I was a private, one among many going through, one among many soldiers, and I was at the bottom of the flipping food chain. So interact, being a relative term, yes, I encountered him. Yes, I spoke with him, but it wasn't like I had any significant one-on-one interaction. And I'll be honest with you, and this is one of those things where I'm just like, where was my head? I didn't know who he was. I'd never heard the guy. Even though I was an SF kid, right? I grew up in the SF community. Name didn't ring a bell until I got there, and people started, oh my God, that's Nick Rowe. Oh my God. I'm like, who the hell's Nick Rowe? And then they, dropped his story on me. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. I will tell you, he was, for who he was and all that he had endured, in my interactions with him and my observations of him as a leader, consummately professional and humble. I mean, just as relaxed. I know, I'm an impressive individual.
It's one of those things, right? When you're in the moment, you don't realize that in 20 years, 30 years, you're going to look back and wish you had paid attention a little bit.
Right.
That's kind of how the Army is, right? You don't realize that you're doing anything of significance or anything you'll want to remember while you're doing it. It's always down the road, and you go, "Ah, shit! I wish I would have taken my phone out of my pocket and taken a picture or written something down or just perked my ears up a little bit."
Well,
You
and
think that?
I think too, it's, we, it is the catchphrase, the quiet professionals. I don't, I've been, if you ever see me or follow me on LinkedIn, I'll use this phrase quite frequently. I've walked in the shadows of giants, and I use that term deliberately because I was standing next to literal legends in the community, and because I hadn't heard their name before, I didn't know it. A lot of them, I didn't find out their story until after I was further down the road in my career. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me! This guy did that, and because they don't advertise it, right? It's humbling, and you look back, I'm like, God, if I had just kept my mouth shut a little bit more and opened my ears up a little bit more, and it probably was a lot I could have learned, or more. Not that I didn't learn, but I probably could have learned more if I'd been a little less, private.
Yeah. Well, when you're private, your life sucks exponentially more than the next rank above you, right?
Yeah.
Every little bit you go up, it gets better. Um, Being a private sucks in the military, no matter what you're doing. If you're doing well, it still sucks. Yeah, you gotta go clean the shitter. But
Yeah. Well, again, I went through the Q course, as a private, then screwed that up, wound up going back to the reserve unit. So by the time I went back to the Q course, I was an E4 at least. I'd gotten a couple of reserve promotions. And then when I went on active, and then I made it to E5, and then I went on active duty because my last DD-214 had said E4. They brought me back to E4. So I showed up at 7th Group as a tab qualified E4, which did not exist in the 80s. That was an anomaly. And very quickly made E5. But I hadn't grown up, truthfully, and this is one of the issues that I have with that Rep 63 program. I hadn't grown up through the ranks. So I really hadn't matured my way into that rank. I didn't have the leadership grooming that the average E5 would have had. So when I say, it was in my mind, I probably was still an E4, even though I had E5 and E6 on my collar. But I hadn't, I don't know if I'm making any sense or not, but
no, it does.
I needed
Similar,
some more professionalism,
I would say similar to the career progression of the 18 X-rays today, right? Civilian, basic, AIT, jump school, special operations preparatory course, and then selection. And that's all that big block. And that's really your only exposure to the regular Army. And then you go into the course and then on to group. So you're drawing very little. And they say some of that is mitigated by the level of student that we're recruiting to come out as a civilian. It's a higher level of blah, 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 blah. I don't agree. I think you need to, let's see, for lack of a better term, get shit on for 2 years in the regular Army before you go onto the course. I don't think a lot of X-rays would agree with me, but you do not only learn what you don't want to miss out on, or you're missing out on, or you also learn a little bit of what it is like to be a private and have that bond with your regular Army counterparts when you do have to work with them. I think there's a lot of benefits to it.
Yeah, and I think there's from a leadership evolution perspective, I think I was a good 18 Delta. I'm not being arrogant, but I was good. I knew that I knew my medicine. I was solid on my medicine. And that's great to be a detachment medic. But when you then take into account, in that era in particular, the mission of Special Forces, which is to engage with other militaries, engage with indigenous personnel, engage with insurgency or counterinsurgency organizations and lead in basic infantry tactics and train in basic infantry tactics. I didn't have that because I didn't have that experience level of what it was like to go through that, to then be able to impart that knowledge. I was just teaching what I knew from the book because I'd never been in an infantry company. I'd never been on an infantry squad. And I think that's the shortcoming of any, there's the truth assault. You can't you can't mass produce. I think that's not the downfall, but that's one of the limitations of an 18 X-ray or Rep 63 program is you cannot infuse the experience of having grown up in that environment to then be able to go out and take those lessons that you learned and teach them as a subject matter expert. Am I making any sense to you at all, what I'm trying to say here?
Well, it's just like, what's this? Teenager in your 20s and even in your 30s, you don't know what you're doing. And it takes a lot of experience to figure that out to where you get to a point. And it's the same way with leadership in the military. It takes a lot of years to gain that wherewithal to know what you don't know or know how to instruct people, lead soldiers, mentor junior soldiers and all that. And it's the same as in real life. Experience takes, unfortunately, too long to get. And
well, I draw the analogy. I teach at a physician assistant program here in Maryland, and I've been a PA for 30 years. And so when I talk about emergency medicine, my lessons that I'm trying to pass on to my students, I could teach them what's in the book. I could teach what the textbooks say about this condition, but I've got some experience with a lot of those conditions. And so it makes me a better instructor because I've dealt with it. I've seen the medical conditions when they go with the way the book says they're supposed to go. And then I also have seen that same medical condition when it didn't go the way the book says it was supposed to go, and how to recognize that, how to adapt to it, how to flex, to the situation put in front of you. So I'll apply that back to my time as a young E5 on a team. I could certainly teach basic infantry tactics, but all I was teaching was what I knew from the book because I didn't have the time in the dirt and in the woods and on the ground to be able to teach from experience. And I think that's what I guess all I'm trying to say is the power of your personal experience that you bring to the equation as an instructor and as a leader.
So you get through, phase 2 and phase 3, and you get the blessing from the schoolhouse, and you go back to 11th, right?
Yeah.
What was life, and then after that on to active duty in 7th? What was life like in 11th, day to day or drill to drill, and then that switch to full-time Green Beret? What was your daily life like first, and then what it transitioned to?
So I went back to school. I was working full time and going to school, and doing my drills. And I was very fortunate. And I just look back on my career and how just lucky that I've been. A lot of our guys at 11th Group were former active duty guys, many of them out of 10th Group. A lot of them in their civilian gigs, they worked for the various agencies in the D.C. area. That was what their civilian job was. We had guys that were State Highway Patrol, Sheriff's Department, SWAT teams. So, some really good, solid military-esque type skills from the intel side all the way down to the tactical side. So, to get to hang out with them, go to the range. And it was beautiful. I mean, we would go there, and you showed up on Friday evening, you had your welcome formation, you grabbed your rucksack, and you were either in the woods or on the range, shooting stuff, blowing stuff up, jumping out of airplanes. It was awesome. And the catalyst for me, as I was in school, I went back to North Carolina State University to try to get my GPA up, which I did. I was married at the time, and at that time, 7th Group was heavily involved in Central South America. We had a presence in El Salvador, Bolivia, somewhat, Peru, definitely. And I'm watching CNN, and there's guys that are trapped in a hotel in San Salvador, El Salvador. And the story, there were a number of teams down on what the rest of the military, the rest of the SF would know as a J set. We called them MTTs in 7th Group, but today it's known as a J set. And they were supposed to fly out, military air. Mil Air got delayed by a day, and the guerrillas came in and were going to basically take over this hotel, because this hotel was where journalists and, other, NGO type people stayed. And so the guerrillas were going to make a show of force and take over this hotel. Little did they know that they had either 2 or 3 A teams with all the weaponry that an A team rolls with, and it turned into a gunfight. And when that dust settled and the U.S. guys were coming out of the hotel, I'm watching TV at home, and I'm like, holy crap, there's Dan Briley, there's Larry Cardassi, and I just start, like, I know these guys. And I told my wife, I said, that's it, I'm done. I'm going on active duty. I'm not going to let these guys have a little fun. And this is where I hope they can't revoke my retirement when I tell this story, but I'm going to tell it anyway.
Here we go.
Yeah. I wanted to go to 7th Group. I did not want to go because that's where it was happening at the time. And I had taken Spanish in high school. Not a great student in it, but, did okay with it. So I typed up a set of orders that may or may not have been signed by my company commander, authorizing me to go down to Fort Bragg and take the defense language proficiency test in Spanish. And so I went down, gave him the letter, took a DLPT, and I think I got like a 1+1+ in Spanish.
Good enough.
Yes. Promptly walked down to 7th Group, knocked on Hank Luthie's door, and snapped a parade breast as a sergeant major. My name is Specialist, or that time is Sergeant McGinnis. I'm an 18 Delta, and I speak Spanish. Do you have a job for me? And he's like, yes, I do. And he gave me a paragraph and line number, and I took that back to a recruiter and said, I'm going to make your job easy. This is where I'm going. And showed up at 7th Group. And
I mean, the current administration might think it's a little fraudulent, but I think you'll be okay.
I hope so.
That it's so far removed what you can. I shouldn't say that. I have gotten an assignment via a bottle of whiskey before, so I guess I just similar things in my career to get what I wanted. But the admin side of just taking some paper down to some, because there's no computers really at this point at all.
Right? There was no ATARs, no whatever. You just showed up.
Yeah, you're at basically the Dewey Decimal System of categorizing where everybody is on post and things like that. So that's totally believable that you can just show up with a piece of paper and get things done. And then as now compared to now, that's completely unheard of. Somewhere some HR specialist head just exploded. So I think we did skip over one thing, and maybe this, I kind of got this here. Is the only reason you became a Green Beret because you didn't want to be a non-airborne qualified soldier?
I guess probably, yeah. I just know that again, I in my head I have this book that I want to write, and the title is an unconventional life.
Leave this part out.
Yeah. I just I knew what I wanted to do, and I didn't want to take a circuitous route to get to it. When I found out that it was possible to go become a Green Beret on the reserve side, I didn't want to spend a year as a straight leg infantry guy. If this is a possibility, then that's the pathway I want to go. So that's the pathway I'm going to go. Yeah, it just, and probably you asked it very early on in this process, largely influenced by my background. I mean, I knew, to me, SF was home. These were my people, right? It's all I'd ever known. As a kid, it's a terrible movie. It's just blatant propaganda. But, the Green Berets, I mean, that was John Wayne. And I watched that movie, and in my head, that's my dad, right? I didn't see any other option for me. I really didn't. It was the only thing that I could have done.
Did they have graduations like they do today back then? No, it was just here you go. You can wear a Green Beret now. Get out.
Well, we had the regimental dinner, and all of the sergeants major from the various groups. Of course, back then, 5th was at Bragg, 7th was at Bragg, 3rd had not stood up yet.
Oh, really? Okay.
10th was at Devon's, and then 1st was Devon's with 1 Ford in Germany, and at the time they were bad totes. And then 1st was obviously on the West Coast with 1 Ford in Oki. So the group sergeant majors would all show up, and we had the regimental dinner, and then we went to some old rickety, dilapidated movie theater over on the Coscom side of Post, and walked stage, got your beret, and off you went. The whole production like they have now, I guess at the Coliseum or wherever they do it, that didn't exist.
And you were right at the beginning of the tabbed era of Green Beret, right?
Yeah. It was becoming a branch. I think the tab had just been authorized. When I came back, so at that time, the medic portion, phase 2, was done in 2 phases, 1 phase in San Antonio, and then the other final phase at Bragg. And when we came back from San Antonio to prep for the second half of phase 2, the first selection course was going on. That was the very first group of selection. And I look back on that. I look at what I see on YouTube and all. Dude, I'd have never made it. No flip.
I did the stuff that they have on the videos of the 2 weeks in hell or whatever, and I still watch it once in a while and go, fuck, I don't want to do that. Shit, that looks hard.
I look at that right now. I'm like, there's no way on God's green earth I would have survived that. No way. Now, again, I say that looking back on it. Certainly when you're in it, you put your head down, you do what you got to do. But, geez, that stuff brutal.
You just, for me, it was you get to this phase, and then, I don't know, I just rose to the occasion to pass it.
Sure.
Just every time. I don't think I was, because I'll look at it objectively back and I'll go, I don't know if I was good enough to pass it, but when I was in it, I just did it. There was no other choice than to succeed at the time. And that's kind of how I saw my whole career. It's like, we have this unaccomplishable tasks. Okay, let's get this out of the way and then just go on to the next thing. What was it like? Now you've gone through phase 1 and now you're at 18 Delta, and then Sage is still at the end. Was Sage a little different than it is now? Or is it kind of similar?
I don't know. I think Sage has expanded. I think Sage is probably a little better organized.
It's quite the production.
It seems it. More so than, not that ours wasn't good, but from what I've seen, again, just through social media and some of the military publications and all, I think that the game is played much more realistically than it was when we went through. Certainly, it was, we were supposed to jump in, but an ice storm hit. I mean, went out into, I think, January or February. So we, CH deuce and a half is how we got in, and hopped off the back and walked forever, carrying us, enough supplies for a small village on our back. And then the standard things, you've got to build a rapport with the Gs, and the G chief made your life miserable for probably the first 24 to 48 hours just to sort of get your attitudes right. And then, the indige were there. We still had the the support network. I remember I had a mission I had to do was, I don't know if they still teach this or not, but it was a mission called a message pickup, where you basically photograph, this back before digital, right? So you photograph, you put your 35 millimeter thing in a smoke grenade canister, attach it to some 550 cord, stand out in the middle of a field with this big loop of 550 cord standing up on two tree limbs or small saplings that you would cut down, and then a small aircraft flies over trailing a treble hook behind it and snatches this thing up and takes off with it. But that was my mission, and it was way on the other side of town. And, you know, I'm briefing on how we're going to get there. We're going to leave at some ungodly hour. We're going to walk forever. And the instructor looks at me and says, why don't you just ask the Indians for a ride? And I was like, I can do that? And so we crawled in the back of a grain truck, and it's pretty realistic. You know, we're in the back of this grain truck, and we're going down through some little, you know, teeny tiny town in the sand hills of North Carolina, and you're looking out through the slats, and you're seeing these people go about their normal day. And in my head, I'm like, you know, if this was real, we're vulnerable here. And that was kind of a, you know, again, another light bulb moment of what would be to truly do this, you know, insurgency type operation. But you know, we were still in uniform. We weren't in civilian clothes. We didn't get out in the town and do some of the stuff that I see you guys are doing in this generation.
You said something. You said, "I can do that?" ? There's a moment like that in every SF guy's career when they realize that accomplishing the task is way more important than how you get it done.
Yeah.
Sergeant Major Reese said at selection, he said out there, he said, you know, commander comes to me and says, you know, I need this cat skinned. Sergeant Major says, there's a lot of ways to skin a cat, sir, but you leave for 20 minutes, come back, that motherfucker will be naked.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's, I think everybody in their career realizes, I can do that. Okay. Then let's just get it done at any cost. There's not a lot of units like that, especially SF. Just figure it out, Sergeant. I gave this to you. I got other shit to take care of. And then you got to take care of it yourself. Is that kind of how you saw it? Because you went on to some even more professional units on down the road. Is that even more paramount the higher you go?
Oh, absolutely. I say this as a guy who retired as an 04. Dude, in the special operations world, the NCOs they drive it. And I remember and I was in a U.S. SOCOM unit, and there was an 05 explaining how he was going to go about doing something. And there was a sergeant major who very professionally, but very firmly said to this 05, that's about the stupidest thing I've ever heard. It was professional, but he just laid it out that makes no sense. And then he proceeded to say, here are the steps you need to go through to get the thing done that you want to do. And you're going to be right on the edge of what the regulation says you can do, but you'll be on the right side of that edge. And I think, again, that's just the strength of the special operations community is in the intelligence and the creativity and the willingness to push right to the very, very edge of the envelope that the NCO Corps has. It's just mind-boggling.
Yeah, we definitely push things as far as they would go.
Maybe a little hole in the edge of the envelope every once in a while.
No, as long as you don't get caught, okay, we're okay on some of the things, as long as you don't get caught. But when you do get caught, the hammer's going to fall on you. And there's nothing I can do to save you, if you know what I'm trying to say.
I do. I know exactly what you're saying.
So now we haven't up to this point been an everyday 365 soldier, right? We've been part-time or in school this whole time. what was it like walking into 7th group saying I'm here and I speak Spanish, which you probably really didn't speak Spanish.
No.
And at seventh group, they speak Spanish, right?
We used to call 7th group the 7th Puerto Rican Rifle Regiment. I mean, everybody was a native speaker, man. It was insane.
So that's a bold move in itself there, showing up and saying I speak Spanish. But what was it like going from part-time to full-time Green Beret?
Vertical learning curve. But I had my guy recently passed away. My first sergeant major was Sergeant Major Tony Aquilinoc. Great guy, good NCO, Vietnam era guy. He was, and it was interesting because Panama was winding down. It was Operation Promote Liberty. So Just Cause was done. So it rolled over to Promote Liberty. So the entire company was down in Panama. And so there wasn't a lot going on. So basically I was showing up and doing, basic stuff. The train's got to get clean. Floor's got to get buffed. I'll never forget, I showed up for PT the first morning. I didn't know there was a PT uniform. I just showed up to do PT, and what I would have showed up to do PT in at my reserve unit. Well, that didn't fly, but I didn't get an ass chewing out of it. I got pulled to the side and was told, this is the PT uniform, and don't do that again. You're in that kind of organization, that's really all it takes. You don't need an ass chewing. You know you're wrong, and you're not going to be wrong again.
I could just, group guys will just be like, hey, just don't do that again. Oh my God. Can you imagine what would happen in the 82nd of that? Just people their heads would be exploding and just, everywhere.
Sergeant Major would know about it. I mean, he just would, it was just, and it's just handled at the company level. Just, hey, this is the uniform. Don't do it again. And that's how it went. And then within several weeks, the teams began coming back, and that was humbling, right? These guys had just been to war. These guys were all, right shoulder patches, and here I sat, E4, with zilch experience. So that was very, very humbling to be around that. I went to a rucksack team initially, and it wasn't long thereafter that, we were gone again. My first deployment was to Venezuela. It was back when we were friends with Venezuela.
It's got to be what, 90 by now, right? 90?
Yeah. Now,
okay.
Hugo Chavez,
and you guys,
the battalion commander for the Airborne Battalion for the Venezuelan military at the time, before he tried to stage a coup and wound up in jail and then wound up being the president. But we had a saying back then: today's student is tomorrow's target, and that to me is the story. But yes, I went down with them. I got my first deployment out of the way, and that is when I definitely found out I did not speak Spanish. That was trial by fire.
For people listening, all of the other groups have 5 to 6 different languages, and at the time, 7th group had one language, Spanish, and they didn't get Portuguese until I went through the course in 2014.
At that time, there was one company per battalion that was a Portuguese company.
Oh, they did back then, because they were just starting it back up for the Rio Olympics when I was going through the course, so I wasn't aware of that.
We had one company in our battalion. I think every battalion had one Portuguese company, but we had one. But everyone else was Spanish.
So you better know how to speak Spanish, so y'all can keep that. Yeah. Hence, though, I never have used my language ever. So
what was your language?
I wish Thai, which is
tough one though. That's a tough language.
It's okay. Yeah, it was when I was doing it, but luckily I've with given time and no practice, I've forgotten all of it. So that's good.
I think the languages are a perishable skill. I mean, I was after a handful of deployments, back to back. I was Venezuela, came back from Venezuela, boom, El Salvador, back from El Salvador, Bolivia. I mean, it was just bam, bam, bam. my Spanish was rocking. But and that's many, many years ago. I go out now and I try to speak Spanish at the local restaurants and stuff, and I can still do it, but it's not anything like what it used to be. It's a very perishable skill.
Especially in that environment where everybody's just all the time. So 1990, fifth group is, getting ready for Desert Storm. You guys are running counter narcotics, down in South America. What was the op tempo like? Were you just home, gone?
Yeah, you were gone 6 months out of the year. It was just a given. You might not be gone 6 continuous months, but you were going to pull the MTTs, or again, what is now known as a J set. They ran about 90 days, anywhere from 6 weeks to 90 days, depending upon where you were going and what you were doing. So you would do 1 or 2 of those every calendar year. And then, of course, there's always a school or there's a training event that you would deploy for. So I think we were gone easily 6 months out of the year. And some of the guys were, if you got attached to the mill group in El Salvador, that was a 1-year assignment. And then we had teams going to Colombia for 6 months at a pop. We had guys in Peru against the Shining Path, 6 months at a pop. So my up tempo was robust, but it was short back home. And these guys were like gone for half a year, back home, and then right back into the cycle.
What was the team room life like at that time?
In the best way possible. I mean, it was, nobody was safe. I mean, and I mean that it was tight. It was, we were very close knit, but it was, there's nothing gentle about it. I mean, it probably no different than the way it is now. If you showed a weakness, somebody was going to jump on it and hammer a little bit, just to sort of, dull your feelings.
It's a very fraternity-like environment in the team
Absolutely.
room.
It was.
Yeah, and if you show any weakness or say anything stupid, God forbid you get a nickname, and then that's going to follow you around for
you'll follow that for the rest of
your career.
Yeah. When the team life was good, I had heard all you heard all the stories about you hang out with each other, and you're after work and on weekends and stuff. And to be honest with you, I did not experience. I did not have that level of cohesiveness and tightness. But on the team, we were tight. And if you needed something, you could pick up the phone and there'd be somebody there tomorrow. My ex-wife and I bought our first house and my team helped me move. I mean, it was that kind of a thing.
It all trickles down from the team sergeant, right? And dictates how the team's going to be as a family and train and accept new guys. What was it like getting a new guy on the team? Because, you get established on a team, you get a new guy. What was that like?
So after I left the rucksack team, actually I had gone to, where had I been? I think it was El Salvador. I had come back from El Salvador, and my team had pretty much dispersed. One of the guys had gone to Halo school. A couple of guys ETS'd. Just the team just sort of was dissolving. And so I came back, and at that time, Mel Lyles was the battalion sergeant major, and he called me into his office. I'm like, "Holy crap! I just got back. What have I done?" And he looked at me and said, "You want to go to the Halo team?" I'm like, "Buck sergeant, right? Been in the unit for maybe a year." I'm like, "Yeah, I'll go to the Halo team." So when I got to the Halo team, and I think, I don't know, maybe it's because I was young looking, or maybe it's because of the medic. I didn't really experience a lot of, I don't want to say harassment. The transition to the new team was not difficult, right? It was pretty smooth, but a few hiccups here and there. We got in some other people. One guy you look back on your life and you're just like, God, why was I such a jerk? and it probably because of my own lack of personal, professional security in myself. I don't know. Well, we got a guy in named Brad Snortland. Brad was a good dude. I mean, really good dude, but he 82nd Q course, boom, in the 7th group. And he still had, as all of them do, still had a lot of 82nd isms about him that you just have to work out of your system by being on a team and a new way of thinking and all. I rode that poor guy like, I don't know, I was horrible. And I don't even know where it came from. It's not like I had a ton of experience. I had like an extra, maybe a year on him, but it is what
I
it is.
think it's that
If I could do it
mentality
over
in the
again,
team room.
if I could call Brad up now, dude, I'd apologize 100 times over.
I think it's just that mentality in the team room, and that becomes because there's this attitude of team guys, and they're just kind of a dick all the time when you're on a team, especially when you're on a team. You've got other people to back you up, and you're kind of cocky, and you really know your job really well, and you're just really good at everything, and that feeds into your psyche that I'm awesome, and I just need everybody else to know that. It's kind of a toxic trait that is an ancillary effect of being a Green Beret.
I'm glad to hear you say that because, again, I'm 60 plus years of age. I'm reflecting on my life and 100 things I wish I had done better. And I carry a certain amount of, guilt's not the right regret, I guess, for maybe not have been a little more humble and been maybe a little more professional in the way I approach some things. But it's good to hear someone from your generation say, "Nah, it's just kind of the way it is, right? It's a byproduct of the system that created us." You're cocky. You have to be to do the things that they ask us to do. You can't be timid. You can't doubt yourself. You can't not believe that you're capable. And there's a pecking order to it, and you're constantly trying to establish where you are in that pecking order. So,
I was working down in North Carolina after the hurricane came through, and the National Guard was there doing their thing, and there were two SF teams in the back, and I kind of left them alone, but then I found out that one of the guys on the team, we went through the Q course together. So then I kind of went and met everybody after that, and I'm walking through the hall one day, and I've got my Green Beret Foundation polo on, and this private like grabs me up. He's like, "Hey, were you a Green Beret?" And I said, "Yeah, I used to be. What's up?" And he starts asking me questions about it, selection and the course and all this stuff. I said, "Yeah, man, I'll tell you whatever you want, but why didn't you ask the guys that are in uniform?" He's like, "To be honest with you, man, they're just scary." I said, "Oh." And I thought about it for a second that was ridiculous. And I went, "Yeah, no, they totally are scary to a private to go." And that attitude that I spoke about earlier, that's whether they're conscious of it or not, is there. There's a 6'2", 6'3" Green Beret. You put them next to a regular soldier. It's not even the same. It's not the same. It's a different class of Army that you're comparing things to, and that feeds into it too, of how they carry themselves and how people perceive them, and then they get more into their head about that. And some guys, they're just it's bad for them.
well, and you're right. I mean, there's I've a phrase I've used multiple times. One man's confidence is another man's arrogance. So you can come across as arrogant and aloof. You don't intend to be. It's just you're very confident in what you're capable of doing, and you exude that, and people can be intimidated by that. I will tell you, I had the opportunity to work with some guys from, the other side of the fence, so to speak, and this is late in my career, and incredibly intimidating to be around those guys. Nice as they can be. I mean, just some of the nicest, most professional, humble, just great human beings. But from afar, it's like, holy crap, I don't want to talk to them because these guys are on a whole, that's a varsity league. They're on a whole other level.
Yeah, that's their pipeline leads more to that. just weeding into an even tighter mold of exactly what they want to do, a more specific job. Whereas as in group, it's a pretty broad mission set, right? And you have to have a whole lot of different people to accomplish that. That's why the teams are bigger, the groups are bigger. The areas of responsibility are pretty much the same, but
and you
it's
have a
just
much broader
different
mission palette compared to, they do one thing and they do it extremely well, but they do one thing.
And they do not tolerate any of the stupid bullshit that we will put up with at least a little bit. So we're growing as a team. Guy, you ended up going into, was Halo School a thing back then?
No, you had to go to Halo team. It was not part of the pipeline. So
but you still went to Halo School, right?
I did, yeah. So I went to the Halo team, and then my team sergeant was Mel Lyles of the Halo team, but then he was a sergeant major by the time I actually got onto the Halo team, and he had been an instructor at Halo committee, former Golden Knight. I could not get on the ATARs to save my life. I mean, as a medic on a Halo team and could not get on the ATARs. It was weird. So long story short, I got in on a standby slot, and because of the backroom deals that the senior NCOs were able to do, and so I got in. And at that time, we had to go to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base for the wind tunnel. They didn't have one at Bragg. Went up there, met with a guy named Dana Bowman, who had been a 7th Group guy, Bronze Star, I think, with V device for throwing a bunch of hand grenades at a bridge somewhere during Just Cause. Good dude. Later went to the Golden Knights, had a mid-air collision, lost both of his legs, wound up staying on active duty, still skydiving to this day. Good guy. But went up there and then came back and did our 3 weeks at Bragg, flinging our bodies out of airplanes, and I wound up on the Halo team and did a couple of deployments with them, and then another long story. Just sort of took a look around at where I was, and I don't have a lot of real Army experience behind me. I don't even know that I want to be a team sergeant. I don't think that's in my future. Had seen some guys get hurt, not like deployment hurt, just bad PLF, parachute landing fall, the wear and tear of 10, 12, 13 years of being on airborne status. And they wound up getting medically retired with no real skills to take to the outside. There's no such thing as skill bridge back then. And I saw that happen to a couple of guys, and I thought, man, I'm one PLF away from that. That could be me, because I didn't have a college degree. I was an 18 Delta, but that didn't translate to anything in the civilian world. So I applied to go to PA school, and
is that green to gold, or what did they call it that back then?
No, I went to Army PA program.
Okay.
Yeah, it was at the time, sort of the conventional wisdom was that you would apply to PA school and you get rejected, and then you would go to SWIC and you'd teach for a year or two, or you'd go to one of the other units in SOCOM and get a little bit more experience at that level, and then you would apply to PA school and go again. I think there were 7 of us that applied out of 7th Group, and all but one of us got in. It was a bizarre year for 18 Deltas. So I went back to San Antonio, and I thought I was going to be a warrant officer. Back then, PAs were warrants. And in the transition from actually applying to PA school and not starting until a year plus later, they did the things they did, and we wound up getting commissioned. So I went from staff sergeant to 2nd lieutenant, and then went straight to the 82nd. Talk about
I was going to say, after you graduated that, you owe the Army, what is it, 2 or 4 years after that?
I owed 5 back then. Yeah, it was 5 years.
What's it called? An ADSAG, I think? something like that.
What do they call that?
Additional service obligation.
The active duty service obligation. Yeah. The PA school was 2 years long. You did a year in San Antonio in the classroom, and then you did a year at a hospital rotating through various clinics, and then you got commissioned. And I owned a house at Bragg, and nobody's clamoring to go to the 82nd. So I told Branch, I'll go back to Bragg, put in the 82nd. So I did 2 years there.
2 years there. So PA school was 93. So you did 2 years. Where'd you do your other 3 years?
I did 93 to 95 was PA school. And then I did 2 years in the 82nd. I did a year with 407th Forward Support Battalion. Did a year and some change with First of the 05. And then went to 3rd Group and did about 18 months in 3rd Group as the group battalion PA for 3rd Battalion, 3rd Group.
What was that like getting to the 82nd as a tabbed second lieutenant?
So, again, this was an era when PAs, at that time, most PAs were prior NCOs. And so we were able to, we had a good rapport with the NCOs because they all knew that we had been where they were at some point in time. And senior NCOs liked us. And battalion leadership tended to like us because they knew that if we said that Joe needs a break, Joe needs a break because we've lived Joe's life. We know that Joe, if you'll just lay off of him, he'll get better and you can get him back into doing the stupidity that they do in the 82nd. I say that with nothing but love and Jesus in my heart. I love the 82nd. They're good guys, but it is a big Army mentality. The challenge was usually with the company commanders or the company level leadership. I can remember more than once write a kid a profile. He's not broken, but he just needed about 10 days of no run, no ruck, no jump. Let him get healed. And I think SOF does a much better job of that now than they did even back then. But and the kid would come back. It's like, my company commander says it's just a recommendation. He doesn't have to listen to you. And he's right. It's just a recommendation.
The most dangerous phrase in the military. My company commander says it's just a recommendation. Yeah, well, I guess that guy's not going to re-enlist now.
So I'd pick up the phone and call, and I'd say, hey, sir, this is Lieutenant McGinnis. I say, okay. So put on my BDU blouse with all the stuff on it. Of course, the Halo wings weren't authorized this time, but I had, EFMB and all the stuff and the tab. And I've got gray hair. I've had gray hair since I was 30. So then I'd, walk up and I'd sort of lean with the left shoulder and say, hey, sir, how are you, Lieutenant McGinnis? And then the light bulb would go on. It's like, oh, this guy might actually, he's a lieutenant, but he's not a lieutenant, right? So I also tell you, I back to being cocky, just cocky. I had been on the Halo team. I forget how many jumps I had at that time, but kind of envisioned myself as above having to go to basic airborne refresher because, I had X number of jumps and I was a freaking Green Beret or whatever. So they wouldn't let you jump until you went to basic airborne refresher. So I went down to the advanced airborne school and showed the guy the paperwork to do BAR, and he saw all the badges and whistles and gray hair, and he's like, do you really want to do this? I said, no, not at all. He said, you're good. Rubber stamped it, went back to the unit having finished basic airborne refresher.
They might pull your retirement for that one. They might. Yeah.
My first airborne operation in the 87. Now remember, PA school for 2 years, had not jumped out of an airplane in 2 years. Mm-hmm. A couple of years on a Halo team, hadn't jumped static line in 4 years. And my first jump in the 82nd was 6 C-141s in trail at night. It was unlike anything I'd ever done before. I sat up, I was like, holy crap, what have I gotten myself into? It was indoctrination into what life in the airborne was truly like. It was good stuff.
Yeah. Who was that telling me a story? A friend of mine was telling me a story of the big jump, 82nd, and
Oh yeah,
just
they always do these.
People dying, like actual dying on the. It's all fucked up and all the time, and he's just throwing it out there like that was a normal everyday thing. That's something people don't hear about. Is these big units like this? They'll do a division jump and people die.
Oh, when they do, so they would do what they call large package week. So through the course of the week, almost the entire division will be jumping out of an airplane, and the emergency room at Womack is just it's brutal. It's an ortho clinic, and that's just that's normal. That's part of the course. They know they're going to break bones. We did that jump. They utilized something called the AWADS, the Adverse Weather Airborne Delivery System, where essentially the pilot's up front and he's looking at his instruments, and you can't see the ground. It was foggy. You couldn't see anything. They just, once the plane hits the coordinates, they flip the green light and out you go. Contrast that to my time in SF, where we were, looking at visual panels on the ground, and, it was a whole different way of doing things. And I tell people, if we get 6 guys in a Huey and somebody's got a Leatherman, we call it a combat equipment, right? If it was dusk, we'd call it a night combat equipment. And the 82nd.
The Army really loves, especially airborne soldiers, loves the airborne. And looking back on it, it was just really stupid.
It's just a way to get to work, man.
Yeah. I got quite a few injuries, little ones in here and there, but the one that nags at me the most was just a bad PLF, and I PLF'd wrong, and then the next day I stepped out of a vehicle wrong and caught my toe on the ground and just felt a lightning strike all the way through my hip, up and down, and it hasn't gone away. I've strengthened it into where it doesn't hurt as bad, but it's been there ever since that, and that's just from one jump. And guys have hundreds and hundreds of jumps, and they're just in bad shape.
There's a medical paper out drawing a direct connection between osteoarthritis of the knees and and time on airborne status. So a lot of guys are using that. VA.
The 82nd commander would go, "Oh, this is garbage," and throw it right in the trash can. We got to be ready to be anywhere in the world in 48 hours. This is garbage. So stress on the family life, and I've gone through this as well. That constant tempo of going everywhere all the time, and especially in SF, guys will sacrifice their family many times over just to do the next thing, go on the next deployment, stay on the team, go to a school and all that. Did you see that a lot in 7th Group especially, or in your experience?
I saw it and lived it. It's the weirdness of what we do. Mission first, mission first, mission first. I didn't remember volunteering to do stuff. I didn't even have to go, but it was a deployment. And so I wanted to go because the Sergeant Major needed somebody to go do this thing. And so I'll go, Sergeant Major. And we saw it. I saw it in my time in the late 80s and early 90s in group, and then saw it again, after the response to 9/11. Not that guys were volunteering at that stage of the game. It's just the op tempo was what it was. You're gone. She's running the household. She's got everything handled. You're off living your best life. And I can be honest with you, 7th Group, Latin America, we had fun. We worked and we worked hard. We had a lot of fun right down there as well. And then you come home, and typical barrel-chested freedom fighter, large and in charge, I'm home now. And meanwhile, she's got this routine that she's developed. She's got everything. She's sort of settled in, and you come home and you disrupt all of that. So there's that disruption, and then you have to settle into the new norm. And just as you're sort of getting back into the new norm, up comes the next deployment, and off you go again. And so this cycle repeats itself. And You're gone. She's alone. Manage anything by herself. You come back. The first month or so, it's not good because you're disrupting her norm, and then you finally get in a good spot again, and then you're gone again. That's hard on anyone. That's just on anyone. That'd be hard.
Yeah, it's a yo-yo existence in group. It's constant, and then meanwhile, I mean, you're volunteering for everything at work because that's just what you do. You just want to go do everything, and you just have really. I've met very few people that wouldn't just think Army first, rather than any, and that was in my way of thinking too. I mean, I would do a lot now to get back in the Army. I wish, but that those days are over. But just looking at that, like, why do you think? What's the draw as living that high intensity lifestyle, adrenaline all the time? What's the draw? Did you guys just become physically or emotionally addicted to having that stress in their life?
I don't know that it's necessary. I mean, there could be some, I think that the new buzzword now is a dopamine addiction. I don't know if that's truly it or not. I'm going to probably say some things that are unpopular, but I think a lot of us that gravitate towards this life are fundamentally insecure in some area of our understanding of who we are. And we're constantly having to prove to ourselves that we are what we think we are. And so we take,
I don't think that's controversial. Right? Yeah.
We take the hard assignments. We go to the hard courses. We do what we do, and we cloak it in this wrapping of it's what the Army needs, and I'm a good soldier, and this is just the life. But I think on a deeper level, we are trying to prove to ourselves that we are what we think we are, or we are what we idealize ourselves to be. And then when it all comes crashing down, because the truth of the matter is, and I said this in my second marriage when it fell apart, I tried to explain to her, I can't do what I do when I'm deployed if I don't know things at home are solid. I can't. Matter of fact, I was in a U.S. SOCOM unit carrying a pager, and came home to a moving van in my front yard, quite literally a moving van in my front yard. And I went into work the next day and went to the boss and said, I can't carry a pager. He said, what do you mean? I said, I can't, because if this thing goes off and we go do the things that we do, my head's not going to be in the game. My head's going to be back here. And the people that we support, I need to be in the game. I have to be. And I don't think we can do, maybe it's my generation, maybe, but I don't think so. I don't think it's unique to us. What allows us to push as hard as we do and do the things that we do when we're deployed, as a certain element of that is knowing that the home front is under control. And when the home front begins to fall apart, then it all comes crashing down. Now all of a sudden we realize we're not the barrel-chested freaking fighting badass that we thought we were. We're a bundle of emotional wreck. And it's just, it is what it is. Then we pick ourselves up and we dust ourselves off and we try to repair a marriage. And if we can't repair it, we try to maintain a relationship with our kids the best we can. And then we move on to the next challenge. So,
yeah, it's unfortunate, right? Because of what's required for the job. And I'm not saying it's every case, but almost every case, it's going to put such a strain on your home life, whatever that may be, that it just will go to the wayside. Because the Army doesn't give a shit about you. It only cares about your job. It doesn't care about you as a person. It cares about you as your MOS or your job and what you have to do. And it's giving you orders to do it. The people that we work with care about us, but that only goes so far. The job still has to get done, no matter what the sacrifice. And it could be to your sacrifice as well. It sacrifice your mental health and your well-being and your physical health just to get things done. And I mean, yeah, that's kind of what it requires. And as bad as it says, you're going to have to sacrifice something to do the job and to do it well. And to get to that point down the road where your guys say good things about you, because that's the end goal, right? That's how we really measure it after it's all done, is what the guys you worked with say about you when behind your back down the road.
What's my reputation, right?
Yeah.
What's my reputation? I tell you, when I was in the SOCOM unit, big command climate survey, and by this time I was a field grade officer, and they got all the field grades in a room, and like, so what's it like here? And it was just bitch. Oh, up tempo. Oh my God, I never see my family. We're always gone. And the guy to this survey says, so it's a voluntary unit. You can leave anytime. Mm-hmm. Why do you stay? And the resounding response was, I work with really amazing people. Or what we do really matters. And I think to go back to your original question of, why do we do it? I think that's the other component. We work, whether you're on an A team or whether you're, off, at other layers of the soft spectrums, you're working with top-notch people. I mean, you're working with just amazing individuals, and that camaraderie and that knowing that you're kind of at the top of the heap. That's it's good stuff. And then to know that, again, I can remember coming home and seeing stuff on TV and going, that's not exactly how that went down, because I was there, and that's not exactly how that went down. So it's heady stuff, it really is.
Yeah. We'll sidebar for a second here. One thing that the American public, I don't think understands, and I had a guy I worked with, he was a sergeant major at the Pentagon, and he said that none of it's true in the news, right? Yeah. He said we had the wall in our situation room had all TVs on it, 32-inch, whatever they were. And every time, because they knew something was going to break before it happened, so and then it would get released, and then it would go up, and he'd go, not true, not true, not true,
yep,
not true.
Yep.
And he said Al Jazeera was usually the closest. He'd go, that's kind of right. And he'd go, they're all wrong. And I've got to go talk to some other people about some stuff later this week. You can't, whether you lean towards believing it or not, you can't believe anything that's put out on the media, because there's so many layers of filters that it goes through before it gets to you that it's so far away from the truth. Is that what you saw? Because some of your stuff that you did would be international news. Yeah. And what was the level of dilution from A to Z?
30% might be right. 40% of it might be right. And dates would be wrong. Things would be wrong. Dates would be wrong. Organizations involved would be wrong. Details of what actually happened would be just pure speculation. And that's good. I mean, that's the kind of stuff like, I was there. You're wrong. That's kind of heady stuff. It's good for your ego. A little problematic on the home front as well. It's like, can't, because you can't, right? You can't say anything. So you hear the spouse going off, like, I don't know.
Somebody asked me once about, you're a Green Beret? I was like, yeah. And they, this conversation always comes up. It's, so what if somebody says they can't tell you what they did? They're lying, first off, because the people that can't tell you what they did, you would never know that they did anything that they can't tell you what they did. And that's always funny to me, is, as you said earlier, the most professional, nicest, most humble people in the special missions units, but you would never know that they're even in the Army.
No.
Just living normal life, and great cover story, very smart, and they're just nice people, and you would never know. And then there's people out there going, oh, if I told you, I'd have to kill you. Get the fuck out of here,
Yeah,
you
those are
fucking idiot.
Yeah, those are the ones that are invariably repeating stories they've heard from other people. Yeah.
So 9/11 is the nexus for separating generations, right? That's a landmark occasion in any military career. It's kind of led to everything that we have now, right?
Yeah.
So you had left active duty before 9/11. What year did you retire, or did you resign your commission?
So I owed the 5-year ADSO for PA school. And so in 2000, I got out. And I was in third group, and I had met with the branch manager, for the PA branch, and they told me, you are, we just got you back in the special operations world. You're not going anywhere for at least 3 years. We got some things we're looking at for you, but you're going to be at Bragg for at least the next 3 years. So I bought a house, 10 acres, a couple of horses, got married on marriage number 2. 6 months later, I had a set of orders to go to Korea for 1 year unaccompanied to a Cav squadron. So that pissed me off. And it's like, if you guys will look at me in a room 6 months ago, this didn't happen overnight. You knew this was coming. You just didn't have the guts to tell me. So I pulled pitch. I said, done. I owe you 5. I think it was at like maybe 12 years of active federal service at the time. I'm like, screw this. I'll go do the weekend warrior thing and finish out the last 8 years as a weekend warrior. So I got out, came home, went to work in an emergency room in rural North Carolina. And I'll never forget, I was sitting in the coffee shop called the Java Bean in downtown Southern Pines, and got up, came home, had now bought another piece of property, much larger horse farm, built a house, and was driving back and heard on the radio something about a plane flying into some towers. And my first thought was, this is like Orson Welles' War of the World stuff, right? This was a bad radio show, but that didn't make sense. And then I walked in the house and turned on TV and watched the second plane hit. And I was like, holy crap. I was in a reserve medical support unit. And if there's anything you never want to hear in terms of morale and discipline and anything remotely related to what you and I know of as the military, you will not find it in something labeled reserve medical support. It was really good people, but not the Army that I was used to. And we got mobilized to sit at Joel Health Clinic and do the medical deployment paperwork for every unit going. And when I tell you that I stamped the paperwork for everyone that I knew, I'm not exaggerating. My old team, I stamped their paperwork and they went. Guys I'd been in the 82nd with, stamped their paperwork and they went. Guys that I'd been in the reserve unit with, stamped their paperwork and off they went. And I was locked into that for a year, and I came home and told my wife, I said, I cannot do another year of this. It is eating me alive. So I called up the SOCOM surgeon's office, and the PA for the SOCOM at the time was a guy named Don Barros. And I said, Don, I'm a reservist, but find me a unit going somewhere that needs a medical officer. And shortly thereafter, he called me up and said, you want to go to Africa? And of course, I was, Africa? What the hell's going on in Africa? So I wound up doing 9 months in the Horn of Africa. It turned out to be a great assignment. I was with a reserve civil affairs unit. I was running medical civic action programs up and down the Somali border. It was fantastic. It was really, really good stuff. Kind of, sort of ish war on terror because of some of the other stuff that we were doing, but not really. And it's just an incredibly long story, but the very, very condensed version is I came back from that deployment, and SWCC was expanding the civil affairs program, and they were looking for instructors. So I said, yeah, I'll come teach. So I was very deliberate, back to my earlier, I get what I want, right? I don't say that arrogantly, but I knew what I wanted to do, and I knew that if I threw myself to big army, I wouldn't get it. So I deliberately took that job so I could start snooping around for other things that might be in the mix. And I was over at the hospital getting my credentials renewed one day, and a guy comes in civilian clothes with a pager and long hair. And I just looked at him and I said, look, I don't know you, and you don't know me, but I know who you work for, and here's my background. And if you guys are looking for a PA, I'd be interested. And it was total and complete freaking shot in the dark. And 2 days later, he calls me up and says, "Wait, can you come interview?" And so I rolled over and interviewed and did 3 years with them, and then came back to a moving van in my front yard, and marriage falling apart. And you go back to, you said this earlier, I'm going to probably get a little whatever here. My boss at the time was a guy named Jim Zarnick, emergency medicine doc who had been a doc in Ranger Battalion. And Jim's about 6'4", 6 foot. He's a big dude. And I came in and I told him what was going on, told him I couldn't carry the pager anymore. Jim likes to hug people. And, he just stood up and he said, "Come here." Freaking wrapped his arms around me. And I broke down, dude. I cried like a freaking baby. And it was the guys and the ladies that I worked with at that organization that just circled the wagons and got me propped up and got me back on my feet and got me through the worst thing I'd ever experienced in my life. It was pretty amazing. But I knew that I couldn't do what needed to be done at that unit anymore. And so I leveraged every favor that I had and wound up my last 3 years as the group medical officer for the asymmetric warfare group up here at Fort Meade. And that's how I wound up, here in Maryland.
It's tough. Yeah. Like I said, the sacrifice that you make, and some of that is your mental health, right? And your personal life and your mental health, and you just keep pushing it like down over there, and then eventually you can't push anymore, and then everything falls apart. A lot of guys, start drinking pretty heavily and torpedo their, and then that's a negative feedback cycle, right? You just wake up every day and just make it worse and worse until that falls apart and it doesn't get any better, and guys will fall into that trap. So I know exactly what you mean there. It's tough. And then you got to build back up, and you say, you think you let people down, and you get this false sense that you're letting people down when in reality, pretty much happens to everybody in the military, and especially in these units.
Yep.
Very few guys are, it's the exception to not torpedo your life, or have everything fall apart. Yep. And it's unfortunate. What do you think there's any way to avoid that happening with the way that special operations runs things, or is it just a byproduct of the life?
I don't know so much about preventing it from happening. So the couple of things that come to mind out of this. One thing, the military writ large, when we talk about targeting and when we talk about patrols and immediate action, all that, so there's this term of being left of boom, right? What did we do left of the boom to prevent having to encounter the boom in the first place? In the world of resilience, I think, especially in this community, what are we, when we talk about resilience, it's the ability, a lot of people rephrase it as the ability to bounce back. Well, we spend so much time on what are we going to do after the bounce, right? How do we get them on the other side of the bounce and help them get healthy again. Well, what are we doing on the front side of the bounce? What are we doing before that inevitable thing hits to make them strong and to make them resilient and to make them, whatever term you want to use, so that when the inevitable disruption to life hits, because it is inevitable, you're either going to go through divorce, you're going to lose a loved one. People die. It's just, it's built into our life cycle. People are going to die. You're going to have to leave the military. You have to. It's programmed. You don't get to stay in the military forever. You're going to have to leave. And you get so wrapped up in the military becomes the line between who you are and what you do are blurred. And so the day you either get medically retired or ETS or retire after 20, that identity is just rocked. You don't know where when I left AWG, I rolled in, we did the retirement ceremony. I was a retired 04, never thought I'd make E4, retired as an 04, had been accepted to a doctoral program, had a 6-figure income waiting for me. And I drove out of the gate, pulled over the side of the road and broke down and cried like a baby because I didn't know where I fit in this world anymore. So we all encounter that. When I moved up here, coming out of that, that marriage and that divorce, you're right, dude. I showed up and Ray Sterling, a former Range Battalion medic in PA, was the AWG medic, AWG PA. And he was like, why are you here? I don't retire for like another month. And I'm like, because I had nowhere to live, man. I had to sell my house because of the divorce. The unit down there had a replacement for me. I had nowhere to go. And so I took 45 days of consecutive leave living in Annapolis, Maryland, and I started to circle the drain. I mean, I was not in a healthy place at all. On the surface, I was going to the gym in the morning, I was going for runs in the afternoon, but at night I was just freaking drinking like a fish. Thankfully, it's a walking town. I didn't have to drive anywhere. I could stumble my way back to my condo. But after a week or two of that, I just said, dude, you got to get your act together. And I broke my life down. I sat down one day and I was like, what matters to you? What are your values? What is your core, and what's it all about? And so I broke my life down and I said, my faith is important to me. I'm not a Bible thumping Christian, but my faith is important to me. So there's a spiritual component to who I am. My health matters to me. And when I'm healthy and doing physical things, I feel better. So my physical life matters to me. I need intellectual stimulation. If I'm mentally engaged, I don't think about bad things. If I can stay mentally engaged on things that are of interest to me. I am communal. I need to be around people. I'm not a solo guy, never have been. I need to be around people. And I need to get a better grip on my emotional intelligence and why I feel the way I feel, why things bother me the way things bother me, and why I am where I am at this stage of my life. And if you spell that out, it's SPICE, SPICE, spiritual, physical, intellectual, communal, and emotional. And I just said, if the things that I'm doing and the people that I'm hanging out with are not supporting one of these 5 pillars, then it's probably bad for me. And the more of these pillars that it's supporting, the better chance it is that this thing is good for me. And when I sort of rewrote that script and really started to adhere to that, that's when I truly started to get better. That's when I truly started to sort of get grounded again and started to heal and move on from the brutal divorce. I was still on active duty at this time that I was having this discussion with myself. And then when I left active duty and went through that upheaval and that disruption, I just leaned harder into it. And it's a long answer to the question you asked, but I think if we could approach the way that we are, either as an individual, as a family unit, or even as a military organization, if we could lean into those pillars and really support those pillars in our warfighters, I think it'd be way ahead of the game.
most of life is just getting ready for the next setback, right? Because that's really all it is. You're just kind of fixing things until something else bad comes up. We all experience loss. You only get so many years, and 400 trillion to 1 odds that you're born. It's 1 to 1 you'll die.
Yep.
And I like what you said there, right? What are we doing on the front side of resilience? And this is what I posted on my Instagram yesterday. What's the focus of your cardio training? I trained to be ready to pass dive school on 3 days' notice. And if you think about like that, if you focus on all this bad shit could happen in 3 days to me, if you train for that to happen, you'll probably be ready for it to happen. Because that's the most traumatic thing I could think of for me to happen on Tuesday or 3 days from now is I have to go to dive school. So if I always train with that in mind, and that's kind of no way to live too, it's stressful, but at least as a civilian, I know it's not going to happen. But if you focus on being more ready, do you think there's any focus on that in the military while you're in? Or is it all just, especially big Army, is react to contact the entire way through?
Yeah.
And I know as you go up in special operations units, and I kind of want to talk more about that a little bit, but there's got to be more focus on it, right? That it's actually a thing of resiliency on the front end and the back end, as opposed to on the big armies of just the back end.
So there's a certain element of resilience. If you read the literature on it, and there's a school of thought that it's trait related, right? You either are or you aren't, right? You either have grit or you don't. I don't buy that. I think certainly some of us are more resilient than others. Some of us have inherently more grit than others. But I think that there are things that we can do to get us, and this is the military, I think, does do a good job of this. Maybe they aren't leveraging it as much as they could. Like you said, life is going to kick you in the teeth. It's a fact. I don't care who you are. I don't care what silver spoon you were born with. I don't care what kind of trust fund you have. Life is going to kick you in the teeth. Just what she does. People get disrupted when the thing that they expect to happen doesn't. They get disrupted when there's constant and persistent ambiguity surrounding something, and they're forced to make sense out of it, that these things aren't adding up. They aren't what I think they should be. Nobody's giving me any answers, so I'm going to craft my own answers, not always accurate, not always true, but I'm going to craft my own answers to make sense of this ambiguity. And I think the military, and I think probably one of the reasons SOF is so good at it, is we are constantly teaching and reinforcing adaptability, right? What will you do if on the target? What do you do if, in any given situation? So we teach that on the tactical level. We teach it on the operational level. I think we could do a better job of teaching it on the personal level. What are you going to do if, right? How are you going to prep if? And like you said, if, in your mind, the worst thing that could happen to you would be you get the phone call and you're going to wind up in Key West in 3 days. Wouldn't wish that on anyone. But if you haven't done the training up to that point, it's pretty much a given that you're not going to do well, right? You might pass, maybe, unlikely. But being trained and prepped ahead of time will increase the likelihood that you will succeed. So if we can do that work on the front end, get our soldiers more spiritually strong, then I'm not saying that we turn into, a proselytizing military. Even the most ardent, horrid, denying atheist can sit on a mountaintop and take a look out across a mountain range and go, wow, there's something bigger than me involved here. Maybe it's not God, maybe it's something else, but there's something bigger than me. So doing things to sort of enhance this, Because one of the things that will happen is when we lose control and we feel like we can't control, that adds to our stress. And sometimes you can't control. You have to respond. So if we can teach people and reinforce to them that there's a larger power at play here, and you're just a small cog in that larger wheel. You can't control always the things that happen around you, but you can control how you respond to those things that happen around you. Stay physically fit, because there's data. Well, people who are physically fit tend to be more resilient. There's a direct correlation there, you know. And then stay intellectually involved. Tie back into your community when you're struggling. Don't feel like that you have to do it on your own. Lean on your community, and then figure out why this thing is bothering you to the point that it's bothering you, right? That's your emotional intelligence. Why? What is it about this that's so hard? And it's usually really, really deep, and you're going to have to get into some really uncomfortable places to get to the answer. But once you get to those answers, things start to make sense. Are you tracking what I'm saying here?
Yeah, I got which, but yeah, as you said, right, that there's that demarcation line at the end of your service, right? And it's a hard line. And all of the friends, family, life, post, command, bosses, underlings, everything, that's all gone all of a sudden. And you are sometimes reverted back to that 18-year-old kid who is getting away from a shitty life.
Yeah.
And that's all you know about the real world, because the life on base is not even on the same planet as it is once you get those papers that say you're out. And guys, I said this, who asked me this? It was another PA, SF, a TABS PA, actually. And I said, guys, there's no words actually in English to describe what happens to you when you get out. It can't be described. No matter how much I sit you down and tell you what's going to happen when you get out, you either won't believe me or won't understand what I'm trying to say, no matter how well I try and do it. And I just don't think I don't think it's possible to convey. But so you can do all these steps to get ready in all the preparatory work, but they're still not going to understand the why behind it, because that only comes when you get out and you realize it's over.
But if you can do the work up front, the flash to bang, I think we can shorten that flash to bang window, right? So you're out, right? There's that flash. There's going to be a bang. And then once we've shortened that window, then we can begin to recover on the other side of the bang, and we can maybe minimize the intensity of that bang. And you talk about you've left, right? So when I've done some public speaking on this, it's like you're out. You're not in the club anymore, right? You're just not. And so that's, where do I fit in? Part of that transition is, and there's actually a former Marine raider down at Camp Lejeune named Nick. I'm going to butcher his last name. He's got a Greek last name.
Cum lautus.
You know him, yeah? Follow him?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So Nick's got a book called Finding Your Tribe, or something to that effect. And you do. What is your next tribe? Where is it? And I think if you could do the groundwork, you're going to retire, you're getting out, start to prep, be your own little advanced party, be your own little Advon, and go find your new indigenous support network, right? And begin to build that so that you've got something to fall onto on the other side of it. And some of that can be other veterans that have gone before you. It can be, other organizations that provide a similar sense of, you'll never match it. That's the other thing. You'll never match what you had on a team. Stop trying. It's not there. But
Nick's got a great message. I disagreed with him. He said something a couple weeks ago, and he was saying, he was describing a guy in his unit, right? And he'd done all these badass things and just top of the world, and then transitioning. And he said, it's like, you're going to let this be the thing that brings you down? And I just went, oh God, that's a really veteran way of looking at it
Yeah.
after you're out, because when you're in the process of getting out, it's traumatic. But me now can look back on how I was when I was transitioning out and go, oh, that's, you let that get you down. But that's not taking into account when you're actually in the exercise of getting out of the military, it fucking blows, and you don't know any of the answers.
No.
And you don't even have in your mind that, oh, I'm going to let this get me down. So I disagreed with him. He said that a couple weeks ago, but he's got a great message, and there's, that's what you need. You need to attack things and the way we did in the military. But like I said earlier, unfortunately, we sacrificed a lot of our personality and our personal life and mental health to get to where we were, and then it's over.
Well, and I think, I think the military is doing better than they did. There was a time when UETS, it was, okay, you got 7 days to clear post. Have a nice day, right? Now, at least we see, especially for the retirees, we're looking a year out and actually starting that ACAP process a year plus out. I think it's not the answer, but it's part of the answer, I think.
Everything evolves. It all gets better, right?
Yeah.
And goes on to the next thing. So I did a little Googling.
Oh, God.
About terms and stuff we can and can't say.
Yeah.
So you were on the support side of the house, right?
I was.
In special missions units?
Uh-huh.
Did they make you go through any indoctrination program or to get in there? What was that? Does it compare anything to like getting into group, or was it more of just a check the box sort of thing?
It wasn't check the box, but I think those organizations do a very good job of vetting you well ahead of time, so you're kind of a known entity. I mean, when I sat down for the interview, because I spanned the generations, right? They pretty much told me and said, look, you seem like a decent guy, but we don't know you. So who do you know that we know so that we can sort of find out a little bit more about you? You
got bored? You had to sit through a board to get in?
Yeah, it was an oral board, an interview. So I dropped a few names, which is kind of how our community works, right? So they kind of, I think, had about 80% made up their mind on that. And then they run a 7-day process where they're sort of introducing you to their equipment, the way they do things, how they interact with other organizations. And because PAs are team leaders there, for the medical support side of things, they're putting you in a position to, with the other medical people that are coming to support, and you're in charge of them. And so they're watching how you lead that team and how you, I guess the best
run a clinic.
Yeah, I think probably the best analogy I could give you, it's be like when you get your patrol in small unit tactics, and you're kind of in the spotlight. So it's kind of like a 7-day medical based series of events, and you're, as the potential team leader, sort of under the microscope.
That's cool.
Yeah.
What was it like? What was it like working with that? Is it just that next level of professionalism up above where we were, and it's a noticeable thing?
It just palpable. You're working with you're working with people, and again, actually, how do I describe it? They don't have to tell you they're good at what they do. It's obvious in the way they approach everything. The attention to detail is off the chart. The focus on providing support to the customer is everything. It's And I'm again, things we can say and can't say, and shouldn't say.
The difference from an amateur to a professional, right?
It's one thing to know that, and I'll draw the comparison of the 82nd. It's one thing to know that I could get a phone call and I'm going to come in, and within, what is the 82nd, 18 hours, wheels up.
It depends, I think.
Yeah. Right. But that's what the 82nd always says, right? 18 hours, wheels up, anywhere in the world, 18 well, and they're good, and they're taking nothing away. They are good at what they do, and for their mission, they are fantastic. Thoroughly proud of my time in the 82nd. Loved it there. Back on the wall there. That's 82nd. No, first the 505 thing there. But when you're carrying a pager and that thing goes off, and you're going to be gone far sooner than 18 hours.
Yeah.
Now, there's no time to train. There's no time to pack. There's no time to, let me just do this one other thing. The fact you have to be ready to get real, it's just a whole other way of looking at life. It truly is.
Yeah, and if for anybody listening at home, it's tough to describe certain things without saying certain things that you're not supposed to say. So it's like this, and that's how it is, right? Even when you're in the military, because everybody has it in their head, so you don't really talk about it because everybody has their thing. And so, you know what I'm talking about, right? And then you just don't.
And if you do, you do, and if you don't, you don't. But you don't ask.
Yeah. Right, you don't. Oh, you never ask. Like we had a captain go on the long walk, right? Yeah. And he got back, and I said, "How was it?" And he says, "Yep." And I went, "Oh, so this op order, right?"
Yeah.
And that was all he had to say. I was like, "Oh man, that's probably in my head." I went through all the shitty stuff that probably happened, and that was the whole conversation. So if it does sound like we're not talking about anything here, we're not. Like, it's tough to say. So
yeah. Well, I will say this: we worked with physicians, anesthetists from across the Department of Defense, and these people were pulled from the cream of the crop hospitals across the entire DoD, and doctors, surgeons, etc., are known for having egos. They are. I mean, it's the medical culture. It's just an accepted, these dudes can have egos. And honestly, by and large, those people didn't last. When they came out to go through that selection process, they didn't last. It was the humble, relaxed, tell me what you need, right? Those are the guys that made it.
That must be something, right? Because they've got the best mechanics, they got the best supply clerks. That, and if you don't fit, you just go back, get out of here, So
the guys told me,
it must be an interesting unit just to be that level of the best of the people, because they pull from everywhere, all the branches too, right?
Oh, they told me when I interviewed. They said, I said, yeah, we got it, man. You're Special Forces qualified, and you got emergency medicine experience, and and then they looked at me and said, you and 100 others just like you. I need to know that I can spend, 3 months at a time living in an aircraft hangar next to you without wanting to choke you. That's really what it comes down to. I need to know it isn't your skills per se. Those skills exist out there. It's your demeanor. It's your personality. And again, it's another of those weird things about it. I look back on my time in that organization. It's by far the pinnacle of my career. But I also look back on it and go, God, the guys that I was with, I was down here. Everybody else that was there was, in my mind, was so much better than me, so much more professional than me, so much more experienced than me, so much more whatever. All right. When you're around that level of good, it's hard to look at yourself in the mirror and go, oh, you're not. You're just. I've walked
Yeah.
in the shadows of giants. It's all there's to it.
And that's tough too, because I did what I did. I was this level of badass or whatever. And then no matter how good you are, once you are next to somebody that you're like, I could never be that good. Because I have like that's my thing. Fitness, strength, whatever. Yeah. And I'll see stuff on people online and I'll go, I'll never be that. I'll never be able to do that. Or I'll see stuff in person and be like, I'll never be able to do that. But as long as you can understand that, and that's a better character, right? To go, well, fuck them. I'm going to do the best I can do. And people, that's lost on people, is they're always comparing themselves to somebody else's great and not who they were yesterday, right?
Yeah, I think that's a really healthy way to look at it. It's, on two levels. It's one, I'll never be that good, but that doesn't mean I'm going to stop trying.
Right.
Right. That does not give me the excuse to quit, because in my head, I'll never be that good, but I can still aspire to be that good. I think if you get to the point where you're like, I got nothing left to learn, you need to check yourself. I don't care how old you are or how long you've been in the game. Right.
Yeah. Because that's more important, is the attitude, right? And I think that's weeded out at some of those different units.
Yeah.
Is you can be, A+, and everything else, but if you don't fit in, or if you have that attitude, then you're not going to be a fit in that type of unit. That's the one thing I really wish I would have had the chance to at least try of that, because I don't know if me 10 years ago could have done it, but I know me now, my personality now would have a much better chance now. And so I just really, that always, the more I even talk about it, I'm like, that would have been something, something to at least try.
You're not alone there. And I, again, having a few years on you, I look back on my younger self, and I just was thinking about this today. And part of me wishes that I had not gone from 11th group to 7th group. Part of me wishes that I had come in and said, I want to go to Ranger Battalion. Because if I'd gone to Ranger Battalion, I would have been very rapidly brought into what it is to lead at a small unit level, and you will sink or swim there, right? But also in the back of my head, I was like, man, the dude I was at that age, they would have chewed me up and spit me out, right? What would they have? What would they have?
No, you would have adapted. You would have adapted. If you're going to be a top performer wherever top performers will go to the top wherever they are.
I wish I'd gone to Ranger School.
So
I had an opportunity to go, but the way it was pitched to me, I was like, screw you, I'm not going. We had a group sergeant major, and he was like, every NCO in SF needs to go to Ranger School. You guys don't know how to lead. You just da-da-da. And of course, we're all like, seriously, dude? We graduated the NCO course, and you're telling us we don't know how to lead? He wasn't wrong.
Right.
The way he pitched it was just immediately, we're all like, not going. Wish I had been a little more mature to look beyond that and identified I probably could use the leadership skills that Ranger School is designed to teach at the time. I think about if I had been a little less of a jerk or more mature or whatever, if I'd stuck around group a little bit longer, would I have gotten the invitation to go on the long walk? I don't know. So we can sit here at this point in our career or post-career, and we can look back and go, oh, man. But it doesn't do anything but make us sit around and go,
oh, no, that's not. I know it's not, but I just think about it. It's like, oh, God, that's one, like that type of unit, and knowing everything that that I've heard about it and stuff like that. But yeah, that ship has sailed. And like I tell people, people will ask me about stuff they hear on the news, and they'll say, is there any chance of you going back in the military? And I say, let me tell you, if I go back in the military, we are fucked, because I am on the bottom of the bottom. I'm right above the bottom, because they'll send me to the schoolhouse, but that means everybody else is dead.
Yeah.
So,
I tell them the same thing, right? Because your commission's for life, right? So when you retire, you're still in the individual ready reserve up until a certain age. And I've told people all the time, dude, if they call me, we are.
Yeah,
Pack your bags. We're so done.
There's already mushroom clouds. Things have taken a turn.
Yeah.
So I did my research today on asymmetric warfare group, and I determined that that's a dumb name.
Okay, I'll go with you.
What do you think about that?
So, here's AWGs no longer exist anymore. Here's the beauty. Here's the beauty of AWG. On the contractor side, they were all former unit guys or former team guys, with very few exceptions. On the uniform side, most of them were big Army. They were not, some of them, maybe former Range Battalion guys, a handful that might have come out of the groups, but a lot of them just from 10th Mountain, etc. Good dudes. I mean, we had Silver Star recipients that were in the unit that were from big Army, Silver Star type guys, as well as, on the soft side of things. The unit was designed to take the lessons learned that we had learned on the soft side of things and promulgate them to big Army units that were about to deploy to the sandbox, attempting to shorten that learning curve. Because what we saw, and I'll speak on the medical side, we would see that in the first 60 plus days that units were hitting the ground, their casualty rates were like through the roof because they were having to learn what the unit they were replacing had learned. So AWG was designed to shorten that learning curve. They would send teams, small 3-man teams, 3-person teams, to embed with the unit as they were doing their pre-deployment training and work with the NCOs and work with the leadership on tactics, techniques, and procedures. And then they would deploy with them for the first 30 days they were in country and go on patrol with them and, go out and run missions with them again to sort of refine some of those lessons learned. And it was very effective at getting units prepared for the uniqueness of the Iraq-Afghanistan environment that could not be and wasn't being replicated adequately in their stateside pre-deployment. They also were very good at engaging with something called the REF, the Rapid Employment Force, to getting commercial off-the-shelf stuff that we know works and getting in the hands of the warfighter to get them better equipped. So on that side of things, it was a very, very good unit. The thing that happened with it was there were some haters at the Pentagon. At one point in time, they were a special missions unit. Don't let that term overwhelm you because the Army band is a special missions unit as well. But being a special missions unit simply meaning they had direct line to the Pentagon. They fell under G357 in the Pentagon. And so that was a good thing. But there were some haters. And when the supporters got promoted or retired and the haters got in, the unit began to suffer. And so it went away.
Yeah, it seemed like, well, I saw one interesting thing. It reported to TRADOC, which...
That was late in the game. It flipped to trade. We were initially G357, and then they took the SMU status away and flipped us over to trade.
That was probably a bad sign at that point.
It was a very bad sign, and that's when the wheels began to fall off the bus.
Okay, yeah, and so every group has lessons learned. Because group doesn't recreate the wheel every time they deploy, whereas the regular Army, you would have a battalion or a brigade deploy, and 6 months after they get back from deployment, I mean, you've got 20% have ETS'd, all the commanders have switched out. There's no carryover when they come back into their training cycle and things like that. So there's nothing like that. So you guys were the overarching in the background lessons learned then.
I guess I think that's a good way to look at it too. Probably in some ways providing some continuity from one leadership team to the next, because as you said, you come back from a deployment. The military army, at least, is programmed. You're going to be, if you're a company commander, you're not going to be there more than 12 months, 18 months at the most. If you're a battalion commander, 18, 24 months at the most. So by the time a unit comes back from a deployment, the entire leadership has swapped out. Mm-hmm. Down even to the platoon level, but a year later, that unit's now deploying. Yeah. Where's the continuity of what they learned on their last rotation? And so AWG provided at least a thread of continuity in terms of lessons learned and best practices.
They could have done better on the name. That's all I'm saying.
No argument there. Yep.
Asymmetric seems like seems like a cop out. It's like, that sounds ambiguous enough to sound cool. And then I started looking into it. I was like, you guys are just lesson learned here. This is that sounds really lame.
But you're teaching conventional units how to deal with the asymmetric battle space, which prior to 9/11, they weren't good at that stuff, right? So
right. Prior to 9/11, I say, that's a nexus event. Everything changed. Posts are closed now. You used to be able to go on Fort Bragg. There were no gates. There was no anything. You could walk right up to the windows at the airport. You could have more than a paper clip in your pockets.
You should travel with a pocket knife. You used to be able to fly with a pocket knife if it wasn't, beyond a certain.
It wasn't a certain length. So everything in the world completely changed at that point. And for better or for worse, and everything you have today is influenced by that one event. I know it was for me, so it's pretty interesting to see. So we retire out of AWG, and we get into the teaching side, right? Because did you already have your doctorate at this point, or no?
No. So Pat Mahaney was the commander at AWG when I was there. I think he's an old, he had been a 7th group guy. I'm not sure what group he came out of. Great guy, fantastic guy. Just a really good commander. A guy out of New York. His whole family been firefighters in New York, so he was 100%, locked in on the 9/11 piece and why we're doing what we're doing. And he is the one that sort of got me to thinking about. He told me, when I was a medical officer, I need you to talk to me about resilience, because I think what we're doing here helps promote resilience, but I don't know enough about it. So start looking into that. So that started the wheels turning. And I personally, I knew myself well enough to know that I was going to reach an age where working in the emergency department from noon to midnight, or from midnight to noon, or 7P to 7A, was going to get old. And I needed something to fall back on. And I didn't know if I wanted to go into hospital leadership, or if I wanted to go into teaching, or if I wanted to go into consulting. I just wasn't really sure. But I had spent enough time in the medical world to know that letters at the end of your name mean something in the medical world, and I didn't have the appropriate alphabet soup. So I applied to a doctoral program at George Washington University, which is in Foggy Bottom, D.C. It's human and organizational learning. How do adults learn? How do they learn, particularly in the workspace? And then how do leaders leverage that learning to create organizational change? So it's pillared on adult learning, organizational change theory, and leadership theory. So right in my wheelhouse, all the stuff that I geek out over. And I started it probably a year before I retired, going to school at night, because it was designed for working professionals. And then when I retired, I took a job at George Washington University, running a couple of online bachelor's degree programs for them, while I also continued in my coursework. I used the post 9/11 GI Bill for that, which was sweet, because I got a stipend for BAH at the rate of a married E5 based upon the zip code of the school. And my school was about 4 blocks from the White House. So I was pulling in some nice BAH stipend to be in Foggy Bottom, D.C., which bridged the pay cut that I took retiring from active duty. But when that ran out, I was like, I got to start making some more money. So I went back into the emergency department while I was working on my dissertation. And I was the senior PA for one of the Johns Hopkins emergency departments, just outside of Baltimore in Columbia. And then, finished the dissertation from there.
How many times did you reference your military service in your dissertation? Was it a trillion?
No, actually, I did not. I made, in your dissertation, you do have to sort of talk about what biases you might bring in. And so I did have to talk about my views of leadership that might be biased by 20 plus years in the military. But beyond that, I didn't, because it wasn't for what I was studying, which was, I studied resilience and dysfunctional behavior amongst emergency medicine PAs who are exposed to workplace instability. Right? Every dissertation's got an 8-mile long title to it. So basically, you're a PA, you pick up the phone, you got to put somebody in a hospital, and the person on the other end is like, oh, you're just a PA? I don't talk to PAs. Have your doctor call me. Click. And that happens. I've had it happen to me. So how do we deal with that, right? How do we bounce back from all that kind of stuff? So the military background really wasn't relevant to that, so I didn't get brought in much.
Did you think ever at any point when you were finishing up your doctoral program, thinking back to that kid who got a 0.5 GPA and now you got the Army to pay for all of it, all the way through to get your doctorate?
So, this goes back to the E side of that SPICE acronym, right? The emotional intelligence. I, for a multitude of reasons, never really had a lot of confidence in my own intellect. And then, of course, flunking out the 0.5 just affirmed in my head that I wasn't that smart. But Rocky Farr was running the 18 Delta program in San Antonio, and he put us, when I talk to people about effective leadership, I talk about pressure with a purpose, right? And it's what the Q course is all about. Well, at least I hope it is. Very little pressure that we received was just pure outright harassment. There was usually a reason behind it. Can you deal with the stress? Can you deal with the ambiguity? Can you ignore the stuff going around you and focus on the task at hand? Can you put your own personal pain and suffering aside to do the thing that needs to be done? So Rocky Farr and his team down there were just so good at pressure with a purpose. It was demanding, but it had a purpose behind it. So that was the first moment for me when I was like, maybe I'm not as dumb as I thought I was. And I tell people I tell my students when they come in a new program, I'm like, here I stand in front of you. I'm a PA. I've been a PA for 30 years. I have a doctoral degree, but let me tell you, you're all wondering how hard this program is going to be. And I tell them, it's like 0.5 GPA. If I can become a PA, anybody can become a PA. It's a matter of focus and discipline. You got to want it. You got to want to do it. So yeah, I tell my wife all the time, I look in the mirror and Private McGinnis is still staring back at me, right? He's got gray hair and he's wrinkled and he probably weighs more than he needs to and his knees hurt. But I still see Private McGinnis, and then it dawns on me, like, crap, I might actually have done something with my life after all. Yeah.
Yet the whole time you were talking over the last, 2 hours and 45 minutes, right, is I've heard this from every guy. They'll just throw out one after another of either places they've been or unbelievably difficult things that they've accomplished. And it's so minimized, right? At the end of it, as if it's just an everyday occurrence. Oh, I went off, I was in Somalia and I was rounding up some folks there, and I went to Venezuela, I'm in a Halo school and all this, and stuff that civilians will never, ever get to experience in their whole lives or even understand what you're talking about. And we minimize it to the nth degree of all this cool shit we did. And I think it's really, I don't know if like demean, but we do it to ourselves, and we minimize our own accomplishments when we should go, humbly, of course, I did some really cool shit.
Yeah.
I
think it's the culture that we grew up in, right? That chest thumping and boasting was frowned upon. And I think that's one of the things that our people have the hardest time with in making that transition and having to write that first civilian resume, right? Or having to write that first letter of cover letter for resume, to be able to sit there and say, I have actually done some really cool stuff. It just feels wrong when we start to do it. And
it's because what I'm pushing every time I speak in public or talk to people, the absolute hardest thing is to make yourself sound very badass and humble at the same time. When you can do that, that is just the skill. And I'll write shit and then it's just backspace. Nope. Okay. Nope. We're not saying that either. All right. Maybe we'll come back to this, because guys that can do that, that's the real talent right there.
It really is. I haven't mastered it yet. I'm working on it, but I haven't mastered it yet.
I just look the part. That helps me out. And then I can say, so.
I was going to say that too. I think you were asking, or we were talking about, or talking around the differences between the generations. Dude, your generation is jacked.
There was some big
marathon runners, right? We had big guys, but by and large, the team guys we were runners. Your world, man, they hit the gym and got serious about putting on some size.
I was a big boy in the course. Yeah. There were some big guys in group. There were normal, everybody stood out, especially when we, as a company, went over to Korea. I could, the teachers would pick us out right away. They go, "Who the fuck are you?" Because we didn't like, "Oh, we're not," we wouldn't say we're soldiers, but they were like, fuck, our story's falling apart here because it's just like that.
So much for that cover, right?
Yeah. So, our generation is definitely the biggest, and I would say the biggest and the strongest. But that's just a focus. I don't know where it came from, but I certainly fed off of being strong in group, and then as I've gotten out now, that continued that.
So it's ours was, when I got out, for me, it was running, right? I got back into running again, because that's, I don't know, my generation, that's kind of what we did. If you couldn't run, but I also think that group, soft writ large, but group in particular, got much smarter about helping you get that way, right? You've got the physical therapist down at the battalion level. You've got the gyms that look like, they're unreal. Sure. You've got, I think they've been much smarter about it.
They've got performance centers now, and the Thor 3 gyms. They look like college campus gyms. They've got it all figured. It just keeps getting more and more advanced as things go along. And
for us, there's some pull-up bars, there's some dip bars, and there's some bars with concrete stuff glued on the end of them. Go lift that. So,
there's a lot more known about nutrition now and how things work and things. So I just like it. I feed off of it, and I've said this before, but if I walk up, especially if I do something for Green Beret Foundation or I'm speaking at a fitness event, I want to leave no doubt in people's mind that dude is the Green Beret out of all of us. That because in the hallway, it was just a mishmash of guys, big guy, little guy, skinny guy, whatever. And they were all just as tough as one another because they all got to the same place. But the public public perception of what a Green Beret is far beyond anything that we ever did. They just make shit up in their head. So I just try and just embody that, and they go, "Oh, Nick, that's Nick over there," and then it bodes better for me down the road. What I got a couple questions here for you, and we'll wrap things up.
Sure.
I think we hit on everything that we set out to do. Oh, that was the other one. Tell me about, for those that have listened this far, Valhalla Sailing Project.
Yeah. So, it's Annapolis, Maryland, right? It's a sailing capital of the East Coast. Now, Newport, Rhode Island will argue they are, but Annapolis, it's a rivalry between the two. So I moved here, as I mentioned earlier. I had nothing to do for a month and some change. And in an effort to do things that were good and healthy, I took a sailing lesson, learned how to sail, and immediately bought a smaller 24-foot sailboat, which in the world of sailboats is fairly small. Really just sort of threw myself into it, and it helped, right? It helped me deal with stuff. I'd go out by myself on the boat out on the Chesapeake Bay, cry, scream, yell, laugh, whatever. It's good. Got into racing, found a new tribe, a new community of the people in this racing community here. And guy that I had crewed with on a bigger boat called me up one day and he said, "Hey, I've got an idea. I want to talk to you about it." And so when I do presentations about the program, I jokingly say a Marine and a paratrooper walked into a bar, which should not shock anyone. We did. That was for lunch. We weren't drinking, but we met for lunch in a bar, and he pitched this idea. He had been through something very similar when he left the Marine Corps. His world was turning upside down. He left the Marine Corps. He will tell you, he was hours away from cycling a 45. And his phone rang, and some guy said, "Hey, I need crew tonight. Can you come sail with me?" And that he put the gun down and went and got on a boat, and it obviously turned his trajectory around. And so he said to me, if sailing worked for me and if sailing worked for you, then it's got to work for other veterans. And this was 10 years ago. November will be our 10th anniversary. We stood up this 501c3 nonprofit where we use the sport of competitive sailing to help veterans find their new tribe and find that new camaraderie and that new teamwork. You're in a rifle squad or you're part of an air crew. You depend on each other. You work in harmony together. Racing a sailboat's the same way, right? Everyone's got a job, and everyone's got to sort of do that job correctly if the boat's going to be successful in the race course. And I think we are up to 500, almost 600 people we put through the organization. We went from borrowing boats to we own 3 boats now. It's been pretty interesting to watch these transformations that happen. We have one guy. His name is Bo Darlington, E4, 82nd. I think it was his first deployment, maybe even first or second patrol out of the gate. And he took an RPG round to his right arm and got medically retired. He came to us very early on. And working the bow of a boat is very complex. And Bo, with one bum arm and one good arm, is probably better on the front end than most dudes with 2 good arms. He just adapted, found a way to make it work. He's traveled to Chicago and sailed the Chicago Mackinac race. He and his girlfriend just bought a boat. They're living aboard. They're about to sail off into the Caribbean. It's just been a really good thing to watch it grow and serve as a method or a vehicle for veterans to come together and deal. Am I making any sense? Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I love it. I'd love to hear that and helping the veterans that are, going through stuff. And just, I love hearing all these stories they're talking with Green Berets lately, and just all the cool shit that guys will get into when they get out to just help other people, right? Because it's a selfless coin, right? On two sides, it helps you, but it also helps me. It's like that Alcoholics Anonymous sponsee relationship, right?
Yeah.
But just to do all that cool shit just to help other people, I'd love to hear that. So that's Valhalla Sailing Project. How can people find that online there? Just Google that one.
www.valhallasailing.org.
Okay.
And
I will have.
we don't charge a dime. All you got to do is get your behind to Annapolis, and we'll put you on a boat. We run 3 introductory clinics per year. Our new dates should be up on the website. So if you're in the DC, Baltimore, area, or if you want to travel, we've had people travel from as far as Pennsylvania. Had people come up from North Carolina. Get you out on a boat.
Yeah, man. I'll put when the episode comes out, I'll have everything in the description there so people can look at that if they want to. I would come out and go on the ocean with you, but I have a slight fear of the ocean, and it's not really my thing anymore. So I'm just going to preemptively decline any invitation that you're going to give me.
All right.
All right. 5 questions I ask everybody. Here we go. See what your response is. What is your response to thank you for your service? That's the worst answer I've gotten so far.
No, that is not my response. My response is usually, I'd go back and I'll often say, best 26 years of my life. I'd go back and do it tomorrow if they take an old fat gray haired guy. That's my response. This whole thank you for your support. I'm just not there yet.
I just say it was an honor. Thank you.
Oh, good. Yes, that's better. I like that.
I heard that right when I got out. I think I'd been out like a week, and somebody told me that, and I said, that's the one I'm going with.
I think I'm going to steal that. Yeah, I think I will. I think I'm more comfortable with that. Yep.
It's right to the point, and there's no comeback to that one. It really shuts it down. So
it's not a lie. It's not a lie. No, it was an honor.
Because it really was. Yeah. All right. What is the one characteristic that sets operators apart from conventional forces?
Adaptability.
Just be able to get it done, no matter the situation.
No matter the situation, find a solution. May not be the textbook answer, but it'll get done. Like you said, you want the cat skinned? Don't ask me how it happened, but that cat will be skinned.
You come back, that motherfucker will be naked. Sergeant Major Reese, he was pretty funny. Yep. I think he died of cancer about a year ago. Mm. He's a good dude. At least I saw the obituary come up. It looked like him. What's the one moment of your career that you wish you could go back and relive?
Oh. I lost a guy in Korea, and I did everything that I knew to do at that time, but I'm a far more seasoned PA now. And I would have made a couple of different decisions. I don't think it would have made a difference. I think he was dead when I got to him, but there were a couple of things that I wish I had done a little bit differently.
Damn, man. Sorry to hear that.
If you had asked me this thing a month ago, I'd be broken down in tears right now, but I've been working through it with some people, and it helps.
Well, that's good. I mean, I getting better with a couple of those situations myself, so I know what you mean there. Oh, and like a 1A question on that. You had said your time in the unit was the pinnacle of your career. Was that what you would say was the culmination of everything that you had learned, where it all came together? and that was just it. That was the top of the mountain for you.
For me, it was the top of the mountain because it was everything that I had learned and experienced and grown from as an NCO, combined with a phenomenal opportunity to continue to learn and continue to grow as a medical officer. It was the collusion. I worked with some of the best docs from across the DOD, and I learned from them. But also from a tactical side, was able to take care of them and set them up for success and do the good things that we did because of the NCO background. And then, of course, and I keep saying it, the people that we supported were just best in the business.
Yeah, that is, of all the experience in the military, that's one you can't duplicate at all.
That'll never happen again.
Yeah, there's just no going back on that one.
No.
What's the best piece of advice that anybody ever gave you in the service?
Oh, former 5th Group guy, Don Shipman, died of cancer. Weird. Our people die of cancer at a different rate. Don't understand it. Don Shipman and I went to PA school together. He was several years ahead of me in terms of rank. I think he was a master sergeant when he went to PA school. And I was a staff sergeant. But do the jobs nobody else wants to do and do it better. And if you think about the soft world and the vast majority of the Army, that's what we did. We did the thing nobody else wanted to do. Nobody wants to go carry heavy crap on their back and live in the woods for weeks on end. And, that's what we did. We did the thing nobody else wanted to do, and we did it better than anybody else.
That's the good piece of advice that is the opposite of mine, because the best piece of advice that I got when I was in was a bad piece of advice. When I first got to my unit, and these shithead specialists were showing me around, and one of them's like, "Oh, you don't want to stand out here, because then you'll get stuck doing some stupid detail." You just give him. He's getting out in a couple weeks, and it's just bad attitude, bad advice. He didn't like his unit, and I always took that as the opposite. I was like, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do the opposite of what he said. And that's what the whole way through, if anything came up, yeah, I'll do that. I'll go there.
Yep.
And that was more so after I got hurt. Yeah, I'll do anything to stay here.
Yeah.
So, all right, last one. What were you afraid of then in the service, and what are you afraid of now?
Oh, look at you with the hard questions. What was I afraid of? I think it's the same. Underperforming, letting people down, not holding up my end of what was expected of me. It's the same. That hasn't changed. It's, obviously I'm not getting shot at and blown up anymore, and I'm, not flinging my body out of airplanes, but I got a job to do. I'm the associate director for PA program, and there's some expectations there, and I don't want to let my students down. I don't want to let my leadership down, and I don't want to let my wife down. I don't want to let my kids down. Just doing the job that's got to be done and not letting somebody down.
Yeah, man. Well, it sounds like you've had a hell of a career. And last one, because you said I needed some acronyms after my name. What's the whole signature line now? We got Doctor. What is it?
Yeah. So it's if you were to look at my signature line for my email, it's James P. McGinnis, EDD, Doctorate of Education, MPAS, Master of Physician Assistant Studies, comma, PA-C, which essentially means I'm a board certified PA. I'm done. No more letters. I don't need more letters into my name. I'm done with it.
All right. Well, that's That's the goal, right? The longer signature, the long signature line takes all those classes and all that experience to just have one little block where everybody can learn everything about you, right?
Yeah. That's it.
All right, Jay, you got anything for me?
Brother, this has been a blast. I've really enjoyed it. You've got I've done a couple of podcasts. This is so conversational, not I loved it. It was great.
I appreciate that.
And I hope you can take this thing and run with it, because as well as I do, there are a ton of us out there that we're not freaking heroes, man. We're not, we're not the Medal of Honor guys. We're not the Silver Star guys. But we were out there and we did it. And I think we bring some perspectives to the world that people will find interesting and helpful, I think.
I don't know if I can do anything different. There's guys doing their podcasts, and I think some guys are afraid. I don't say if they're afraid. It's to do the 3-hour talks to get the whole conversation out is what I'm finding. And that's the important discussion. And I hope we can get there. And that's really all you're doing with this is selling stories. But at the end of the day, it's just for you and me. Yeah. And if people find it interesting, well, that's cool too. But I want the base of the show to be, as long as you had a soft identifier, no matter how big the show gets, if you get a hold of me, you can come on the show.
Love
no
it.
matter what. No matter what. It's always for our community. And we'll see where it goes from there. So.
All right, brother. I appreciate it. I really enjoyed it.
Bye, everybody.